Three, two, one, we're on. And please, before we start, let's do a quick audio check, video check. Make sure everyone can hear me, see me. The stream is good to go. And this is the setup that I'm still playing with. We're going to be using this for M-Wave coming up in July and also fine-tuning it for the big day Value Electronics shootout at the end of September. And thankfully it is at the end of September because it looks like the Sony A95L, not A95K Part 2, the A95L looks like a September release. So looks like the timing is perfect. So let's do this here. What I'm going to do is try to go from topic to topic. And as we go throughout the different topics, right, I will then stop and answer questions before we go on the next one. So let me know if I'm missing anything, but I'm hoping to get through these topics right now, right? We're going to do, let's see here, TV settings to start, like that, special effects. And then we're going to do, once we have the settings down for HDR, then we'll actually do some HDR content. And then move that over here real quick. And then we're going to go over how some of the settings may affect the HDR content, because a lot of you don't know really what the settings do. So we'll do that with the Q7. And the thing is, each TV, the settings does something slightly different, so I won't go over all of them. I'll focus on the Q7 today, but if you have a specific question about either the G3, which is behind my face, I'm covering right now, or the U7K or the QM8, I'll try to address that at the very end. So between now and the end, I'll just hit all the Q7 stuff. And I'm really impressed by this TV though, by the way. This is why I'm kind of dedicating this stream to the Q7. It's a pretty good TV. And then let's see, after HDR content, of course, now that's set up for HDR, we're going to do HDR movies. And as a reminder, all four TVs have been calibrated to the best of their ability. So they have been perceptually matched for skin tones as well. So you may notice that the background may be slightly different. That's because Sammy tried to, and Matt Magician, when they did the perceptual matching, anytime there was a slight, you either have to choose the background or the skin tone. They went with skin tone, which is what I like as well. So out of the box, you may have a slightly different look on your TV, but relatively speaking, these are not bad TVs. My focus on this stream, though, is not to compare color quality per se, but rather contrast, which you can see on YouTube, and luminance differences to a certain degree. Because ultimately, I know nobody's going to be calibrating these TVs, but to make it apples to apples, they're all calibrated by the same team to the same white point, right? And in this case, there is no S95C. It'll be the G3 behind my big face, and the Q7, of course, the topic of today, the QM8, which is below the G3, and the U7K, which is on the bottom right-hand corner. And after HDR movies, this is something that I think is important. We're going to go over Dolby Vision, and the reason why I want to go over it is it definitely depends on the TV you get. Now, after testing Dolby Vision content at length with all these TVs, it's sad, but my feeling is that the less expensive your TV is, the worse Dolby Vision will look. It's simply too aggressive in terms of tone mapping, and you guys will see it, right? The better TVs, Dolby Vision actually looks better, like it should, and then the lesser TVs, in this case, the Q7 and the U7K, Dolby Vision really is too dim. And of course, you could play with Dolby Vision IQ, which we will, and you'll see what that's like. But you really have to have it in a bright room to appreciate it. Since I'm in a fully dark room, it may not look as good, but in a bright room, maybe it works. So of course, we'll cover that. And this is an experiment. I'll try PS5 gaming. So I have it all connected. And of course, you have the HDR calibration. And I calibrated it to the Q7. So there are four TVs. There's no way I could calibrate to all four at the same time. But what's interesting is the number of clicks for the Q7 and the QM8 in terms of that HDR calibration, identical. So to the degree that the Q7 and QM8 are very similar, but the G3 is there just to serve as a contrast, right? Obviously, the G3 could be slightly better if I did the HDR calibration to the G3, but you guys all know how good that is. And of course, the U7K. And I wanted to play with the game optimizer bar so you guys see how improved it is by all the makers, TCL and Hisense specifically. So, we'll play with that. This is not an in-depth gaming. I'm not going to dive too deep, but it gives you a sense that these guys really improved their gaming features this year. I mean, definitely, I have to say they surpassed Sony in terms of these features, which hey, I'm impressed. And then we'll do sports content, so I'll put on SDR, my sports clip, super bright. All four TVs will be in super dynamic mode, their brightest mode. So the QM8 and the Q7 will be in their sports mode, but we'll compare to see which is brighter, sports or standard. The G3 will be in vivid, and the Hisense will be in its vivid sports mode as well. Because a lot of you like to watch sports in a bright room, then you could choose based on your needs. And you may be surprised that maybe the U7K is as bright as the QM8, right? Why pay more? And we'll play with low bit rate streaming, so specifically YouTube TV. And I left this last just in case I get hit with, I don't know, if I get the wrong stream, like the NFL, and I get a 2-second clip, they may just shut me down, like boom, right there and then. But we'll see, because I think it's important to try low bit rate, and playing with YouTube TV, the bit rate's not great. The commercials are terrible, right? The ads are really low bit rate. But then with the G3 there, really, G3 and Sony are the two standard bearers for processing of low bit rate. You get to see how close these TVs get. So we'll do that at the end. And oh yeah, almost forgot. Many of you ask, okay, what about upscaling? So let's do an extreme. We'll upscale DVD, right? So we'll do DVD upscaling before low bit rate streaming, and I've just thrown in some random DVD, right? So you guys could see, hey, if you guys throw in a DVD player, because you'll be surprised to know many people who buy TVs, despite 4K HDR, they're still watching their entire DVD collection on it. How does it look? Does it look any different? So it'll be fun. I haven't done this before in a long time. So we'll see how they make DVDs look, right? So we'll leave that right before the low bit rate streaming. And if I'm missing anything, we're going to cap chat at the very end, like, hey, you forgot to do this and this. So if there's time, I'll try to do that. So before we jump in, let's say hello to everyone real quick. Thank you. Hey, Classy is here. Hey, Classy. See, Ratings has a new video of their upscaling test update. Sony in the lead, Samsung second, what a surprise. LG Hisense in the middle, what? And TCL's last. And I have to say, the motion for me, I found a setting on the U7K that fits how I like to watch it, with minimal stutter and just a touch of soap. Whereas the TCL, for me to get rid of the same level of soap, the stutter is just slightly there. So I can see where Hisense could be in the lead for motion. For many of you, if you're like me, you really hate stutter, but you're willing to put up just a little bit of soap opera, which I know Classy doesn't. So our motion settings are very different. And hey, Lisa, hey, Leo, thank you, thank you. And this is a small, quick, I'm going to try and make this stream quick as possible, depending on the questions. And yes, this is going to be fun, Leo. We'll have fun. And I wish I have enough room to throw in a Samsung Neo QLED, but I'm not buying any Neo QLEDs this year. I just don't have space because I got the S95C instead. But we'll see, maybe next year a Neo QLED will be in the works, right? And let's see. Hey, Dan, welcome. Chatting without work. Hey, remote working is a thing for a reason, right? So, all right. Hey, Scott, thank you for dropping by. And Rob, you want to buy my QM8 because it's calibrated? Oh, and just real quick, many of you didn't catch the calibration. So what happened at the very end? I'll tell you right now. The Q7 and the QM8 is not designed to be calibrated. Do not waste your money getting a calibrator. The biggest problem is even though it says 20 point or 2 point, literally it's 1 point. So Sammy's complaint is with that 1 point, he got it the best that he could, but ultimately it was white point and luminance adjustments, but there wasn't much to be done with calibration beyond that, because even though the settings have what they have, there wasn't much to be done. Whereas on obviously the G3, you could spend hours calibrating that. So he calibrated the G3 to the umpteenth degree, and the U8 or the U7K, that one had more calibration control. So he was able to get the U7K closer to accurate, but overall, by the end, the QM8 had the worst over tracking. So before we jump into comparisons, I have to give you guys this caveat, and as others join, you can tell them the QM8 will always look slightly brighter than the other TVs in HDR. So you'll have certain scenes where, wow, the QM8 looks bright, it's awesome. No, it's just over tracking, right? Remember what Samsung used to do with the Q9FN, Q8FN, Q90R, 90T, and the list goes on, right? It wasn't until, I'd say last year, that they finally went really accurate with the S95B following EOTF, meaning the brightest parts of the scene is reflecting the accuracy of the source. The QM8 will slightly pump up those bright parts so it looks a bit brighter than it should. Now it looks great, right? Most Joe TV buyer will not care. And in a Best Buy or at a Costco, they'll go, wow, the QM8 looks great. Look at those specular highlights. It's because they're bumping it up just slightly. And it's noticeable though, slight enough that it's noticeable. The Q7, although it does have that bump, it's much less. So I would say the Q7 is closer to accurate and the U7K is similar to the Q7. So to the degree that you see the QM8 is so bright, keep in mind that it's not just because it has more dimming zones or anything like that. It's just the QM8 this year is just slightly bumped up on the EOTF curve. That's why we have the G3. The G3 is as accurate as you're going to get on the EOTF curve among these TVs. So in scenes where it looks like QM8 is brighter than the G3, it's not necessarily. So we'll have some scenes where, like movies, the movies I know the G3 could handle because a lot of the bright spots are actually bright white, which is the G3's specialty. There's no way the QM8 is going to get brighter in those white scenes because I know the content is not supposed to be that bright. So this will give you an idea of how much brighter the QM8 is, and to the degree that you like that, definitely get the QM8, right? You don't have to get a calibrator and tell them, hey, pump up that brightness. QM8's already bright enough. And so that gives the QM8 that Samsung feel. May work, it may not, and next year they may be accurate, who knows, right? So that's just an FYI for you guys. And then at the end also, once we go over everything, you know what, let me add that topic as well. We'll do off-angle viewing. I'm going to move the camera to the side, and you guys can see if off-angle color, saturation, contrast, just shifts in colors, how bad it is. Many of you may not notice, but it could be bad if it's an 85-inch QM8 or whatever, and you're sitting on the far end of the sofa, you might get hit. Or it's a large sofa, you're sitting on one end and it might be shifted a little bit. Most people don't notice, but some people care, so we'll leave that at the end. Hopefully I remember if I include it here in my topical index. So there we go, off angle viewing. There, as I add it, then I won't forget. And if you have any other comparisons you want me to hit, just let me know, and then we'll try to hit it at the very end. So we'll do off angle viewing last. That way I can move the camera and I have to move it back. Okay, so let me check. Any questions? No. Let's jump into TV settings real quick here. And of course, people who just joined us, if you have questions, we just wait till in between my changes in topic and subject matter, we'll hit the questions. Hey, Craig, came in just in time. So we'll start with TV settings, and then I'm going to pop off, and you'll see the G3, and you'll see the comparisons we'll have with all these TVs. So that, let's see here, take myself off real quick, if I can find myself. There I am. All right, so TV settings. We'll start with the Q7. This is set for HDR. And this is in its most accurate HDR mode. So what you'll see, it's movie mode, brightness 100, color saturation 49, and the brightness settings, brightness 100, contrast 100, black level 50. Dynamic contrast, I'm not a fan of, but if you're in a bright room, you may need it to brighten everything up. Normally, sports will be dynamic contrast on high, so when you go into sports mode or vivid, this normally pops up to high, but in accurate HDR mode, you won't want to do that. Hey, I guess I didn't speak fast enough. Okay, so brightness settings, right. And dynamic contrast, black stretch does nothing. I've played around with it. I don't see any changes at all. And dynamic tone mapping, I'm going to turn it on because as we know, when it's off, you're going to miss out on specular highlights. Although if you don't want it to clip, meaning it's so bright that you're losing some gradient detail, you might want to turn it off, but then it's more similar to SDR. So I'm going to leave it on. And let me see if there's anything else. Oops, there we go. Brightness, off, black, dynamic tone mapping, local contrast. This is local dimming, so that's on high. For HDR, that's always on high. I find it to look best on high, so I will not change that. and gamma 2.2. Okay, so color, this is what Sammy left us with, and it looks great, so I'll leave it as is. Making sure you guys can see that. Yeah, sometimes I'll have to check my exposure in the camera. So clarity, this one really depends on your content. I'm gonna leave it off for now because unless you have bad low bit rate, I have high quality content, so I leave everything off. All these adjustments to clarity, right? Digital noise reduction, gradation clear. I would only touch it if I'm getting low bit rate and the image looks really terrible. Then I play with it. It doesn't necessarily make it better, by the way, but it may help. Motion for me, I will tell you what I normally have it at. Jutter reduction, I normally have it on 3. I like that a lot. Blur reduction, I normally have it on 6 or 7. Blur reduction is not a big deal. It's the jutter reduction. This is the one where many of you may have it at 0. This is too much stutter for me. I normally like it at 3, but each TV changes a bit. So year to year, it may change again. I might have it at 4 or 2. So this is the white balance that Sammy left us with. Now it's for this TV. This is unique. This is one that I don't recommend you play with unless you have a calibrator, but this is what Sammy did with mine. So you can play with that to see if it fits your TV, if it looks better, because at the end of the day, this is what calibration measurement tools are for. And that's the white balance. Okay, so that is the Q7. Then we'll jump to the Q8 real quick. Now, unlike the Q7, I'll tell you right now, the Q8, also movie mode, the brightness setting, dynamic tone mapping needs to be off. If you turn it on, it doesn't help. It actually makes things a little bit worse. It makes things way too bright. It clips a lot of the highlights. This is only useful if you have a super bright scene and you're losing some shadow detail. Dynamic contrast kind of aggressively tone maps it down. Whereas on the Q7, dynamic contrast brings out the specular highlights. On the QM8, it's the other side. It brings out more shadow details. So I leave that off on the QM8. It's, I think, the best image quality for HDR for the QM8. So what else we got here? Everything else, brightness on 100, contrast 100, black level 50, and yes, this one has also been calibrated. And similarly, black stretch does nothing on this TV. Local contrast is local dimming. Always have that on high. Micro contrast, I find this very useful as well. If you want the blacks to be a little bit blacker, or if you want the highlights to be just a touch brighter, right? You play with micro contrast. You can shift it from high to low. Gaming, I find this to be really fun, so I kind of like that. But obviously not accurate. And here we go. The colors pretty much default, very similar to the Q7. And let's see, keep all of this off. So same thing, clarity, digital noise reduction, keep all of that off. Motion. Okay, let's go to the U7K now. All right, settings. So the settings on the U7K and the U8K are slightly different. The menu system on the U7K is a little bit simpler. So filmmaker mode, this will be the most accurate. If you notice on both the Q7 and the QM8, there is no filmmaker mode per se. It's just movie mode. And actually, there's not a lot of modes at all. So you guys can see you're either on movie mode or you're on something completely different. And it's either game, sports, or IMAX. IMAX I do not like. Movie is the most accurate. So we'll play with sports once we get to that point of this review. But on the U7K, you have a few more options, right? You have all these different HDR stuff. Ultimately, though, HDR Vivid is my sports mode. And HDR Gaming, that will be automatically selected once it recognizes the game mode. HDR Theater and Filmmaker, since Filmmaker is calibrated, I'm going to stick with Filmmaker, but HDR Theater maybe gives you an alternate calibration or setting you might want to play with, but at the end of the day, filmmaker mode is the way to go. And same IMAX mode, I have never been impressed. It's a bit too warm, it's a bit too dim. Let's make sure the automatic light sensor is off, and it is off. Now for Dolby Vision testing, when we do Dolby Vision IQ, I'm going to turn it on so you guys can see what that does, if anything. But if you leave it off and Dolby Vision IQ is what you want to select, everything is lifted way too much. You need to turn it on so that it more accurately reflects what your room is like. So, maybe we'll turn on the lights or something. We'll see what happens. And let's see, brightness, local dimming on high, brightness 100, contrast 50, active contrast. Dynamic tone mapping needs to be on the U7K as well. Okay. And warm 2 is also its most accurate color mode. And lastly, G3 is pretty simple. It'll just be on, oops, there we go. It'll just be on cinema, right? Or a filmmaker. Filmmaker is its most accurate. It's calibrated in Filmmaker. We'll leave it in Filmmaker. This will be the standard benchmark for black levels. So if there's a question, hey, is it crushing black or is there shadow detail? The G3 will be the standard that we compare it to with the other three TVs. So because the G3 can be calibrated so to the minutest point, it allows me to say, hey, in this scene, the G3 says this, so the other TVs are relative to that. Now, it should be, right? Because the G3 does cost $3,500 or so, and the other are 1/3 the price, if not less. So this gives you an idea. All right, now we're going to run through HDR at 2,000 nits, mostly because at 10,000, most content is not realistic. Now, on this disk, 10,000 is there for us to push the G3 and the S95C. The reality is, since we're reviewing the Q7 and the U7K and the QM8 to a certain degree, 2,000 nits is as bright as you're going to get from any streaming content or normal content that I would think a user of the Q7 or the U7K would use. So let's rush into that real quick. And then sometimes we might pause here and there if I see something interesting. All right, so let's pause here, check for questions. Moving on. HDR content. All right. Let's see if you have any questions. I'll jump in real quick. All right, let's see. Any questions? We'll give you guys a minute to gather your thoughts. If not, we'll move on to the next one. So let me see real quick. S90C, yes. S90C, definitely a 77 inch, but the S90C overall is right now in the lead for my best TV of the year. As good as the S95C is, and it is, its improvement over the S90C is so minute and it requires such specialized content to see it that most, 99.9% of you with the content we normally watch, Netflix, streaming, even any Blu-ray disc, Kaleidoscape, it doesn't matter, S90C will be as good as the S95C without the One Connect box. And the 77-inch especially is nearly identical to the S95C. The biggest exception, if you need that extra brightness watching sports in a bright room, we're talking full screen, then it's APL. It's a few percentage points higher. It's slightly brighter. But if you need it that bright, you might as well get an 85-inch U7K or Q7 to blast that brightness, right, for less. So at the end of the day, the S90C, I love that TV. So those of you who are getting it, man, you guys are going to love this TV. Really, really good. Is the Q7 the same as C4745? So specs real quick. The Q7 65-inch has less than 200 dimming zones. And I'm going to start off with that. It has 100-something dimming zones. It's amazing to me that the Q7 at 100 and plus dimming zones under 200 is so good. And we're going to see it now. I think this is where many have argued that software is important. TCL appears to have successfully pushed its processing of dimming zones with this few dimming zones compared to the U7K, which has 300 and change dimming zones, under 400. So the Q7 has less than half the dimming zones, and its processing is pretty amazing. Now, let me tell you its trick. What the Q7 does to offset that is it's going to slightly crush the blacks, just ever so slightly. But in return, you're going to get deeper black bars. Some of that shadow detail is lost. The U7K will have some of that shadow detail, but it's lifting the black bars and the contrast suffers. So perceptually, the Q7 will appear to have slightly better contrast because of that decision to slightly crush it, which is what Samsung has been doing forever. It's a great move, and maybe the U7K team will change that this year, so we'll see. But this is kind of like U7K is following Sony's approach, giving you all the shadow detail, but in return, you're gonna have to live with lifted black bars if you watch a lot of black bar content. The QM8, because it has so many dimming zones, right, over 1,000, it can do everything without those compromises. And of course, the G3 is self-emissive OLED, perfection when it comes to these things. Okay, let's see what happens next. Oh, hey, quick question. I'll answer this before we jump. Scott, you snuck this one in just in time. Here we go, put it right down here. Scott asks, what's the difference between the U8K? I don't know about the Q. Normally the Q is a variant for Costco or Walmart or something, but U8K should be identical to the U8K Q, but maybe they'll give you a worse remote, a better remote. I like the Q better. It has speakers on the bottom. There you go. They might add audio, they might add this and that. I suspect it should be the same, but let us know where you are, Scott, because the reality is I could be completely off, and one could have a ADS Pro panel, one could have a VA panel. I wouldn't put it over any of these companies. By adding the Q, they may completely give you a different panel with more or less dimming zones. That happened in Europe. Who knows, right? So unless I have the Q, it's really hard to say. All right, let's do this. Oop, there we go. Took me off. Boom. Let's do it. And we're going to kind of skip through some of this content. Okay, so this is a great place to pause. Almost like adjust my exposure a little bit for you guys. So this is what's amazing to me is in this scene, you're going to have a hard time deciding which TV is the OLED because the contrast, the image quality looks so similar. Now, if I overexpose, right, which will give you access to the black levels, right, even overexposing at, let's say, this ISO 6400, you can see now the G3 has better black levels in terms of the trees, right? So the trees on the G3, the darkest part of the trees, yes, that's where the OLED wins, but what did I have to do? This is actually not noticeable to most people, but my camera notices it. That's why I overexposed for the scene. This is just giving you an example of what you're getting with self-emissive. Both QD OLED and regular W OLED will be able to give you that same level of blacks for sure. So let's go back to normal exposure, what I'm seeing right now. Okay. And we are at 2,000 nits. So this is one where, okay, you notice on the G3, you're getting that contrast, so that's why people get the OLED. You guys know that, but what's interesting is that this is why people pay extra for the G3 or the S95C, is not only does it have that contrast, but the extra brightness is also there. So it has that bright highlight, while the other three TVs, because it's not OLED, but it still looks good, it just doesn't have that depth, right? This is that HDR pop I was talking about, but also if I took away the dynamic tone mapping on the Q7, it would actually look slightly worse, and this is why dynamic tone mapping is on. So let me show you. And this also would affect other TVs who do this with dynamic tone mapping. See, it's completely washed out, right? There is no detail at all. Turning it back on, at least you see some of that cloud detail, not to the level of the G3, obviously, but that's why you need dynamic tone mapping on. But look at the Q7 though, compared to the U7K. In this scene, they're both very similar, except the U7K has a little bit more of the cloud cover contrast, and that's, I believe, from the extra dimming zones. But it's very subtle, right? So it has more than, it's almost triple the dimming zones, but the improvement is quite subtle. So these are the scenes where you ask yourself, is it worth that extra $100, I guess? It depends on when this releases, but I'm hoping you guys can see that. Okay, so let me check monitor here. So as you can see, on the U7K, there's a bit more contrast, right? That's what the dimming zones does. But the QM8, This is not a scene where it's going to shine because it doesn't have enough brightness to shine. And of course, the G3 is setting the benchmark for what kind of contrast you need. And it's not bad considering it's 1/3 the price, right? Okay, nothing to see here. It's the next one where we get the horses. Okay, so I'm gonna pause right here. All four TVs have great, it resolves the background. The Q7 is what impresses me because it feels like the Q7 has more of that. Let me try to put this up. Okay. You can see more of that detail. We're comparing the Q7 to the U7K. The Q7 and the QM8 both have a bit more darkness, closely matching the G3. And the U7K with more dimming zones, it feels like it's unable to match it. And this is a disappointment and a surprise. Now, it's very subtle, but when you have that many dimming zones, it shouldn't even be this close. And yet, this is why I think the Q7 is an amazing purchase because at 2000 nit content, right? The G3 we know is great, but look how close the Q7 and the QM8 get. Whereas the U7K, having dimming zones more than the Q7, it's just one step behind. I mean, it's not significant, but this is the sort of stuff that I know you guys want to see. Like, what are you paying? Well, in this case, you're not paying extra. The Q7 is actually less expensive. This is definitely tone mapping, processing, very impressive. Nothing to see here. And so this is, I like the Beaver, mostly because if you watch mostly news, streaming, whatever, you're gonna have a hard time distinguishing these four TVs. If I said, hey, which one's the G3? No one's gonna know. And if this is the kind of stuff, broadcast content, news, anchors, or whatever, you might as well just get the Q7, right? And this is why I tell people all the time, it's actually quality of life. If the Q7, by the way, very loud. Audio for this price point, excellent, as well as the U7K and the QM8. G3 audio is a little disappointing, but I guess for that money, you should be getting a soundbar, right? Okay, here, this is a great one. So this is where the QM8 separates itself. So, all right. The clouds, the specular highlights in the cloud, so the U7K, its additional dimming zones allow it to kind of pop a little bit more. But because the dynamic tone mapping is on, that extra brightness comes at a cost. You're losing some of that shadow detail in the clouds. The Q7 preserves the shadow detail, although not as bright, and the QM8 has a lot of the brightness, but still does not have the level of shadow detail that is on the G3. But these scenes, unless you know what you're missing, you're really not going to notice at all. What you're really going to notice is that the G3 is brighter. It's extra punch of brightness without diluting the cloud cover. Let me lower the exposure one more touch. So the QM8 is as bright, but everything feels very two-dimensional. You're not getting that extra depth from the dynamic range that's in the cloud. So it's these scenes that allows me to compare non-OLED TVs or non-self-emissive to OLED. This is where the OLED stands out. So let's move on. Okay, another great scene. So the G3, what you'll notice is that the G3 has the brightness, cloud detail, nothing is clipped, right? Yeah, that's exactly what I see. And it looks that I keep on saying three dimensionality. It's really the dynamic range. When you have super bright and then there's layers of shadow near it, that's why the OLEDs look great. But this is a G3, so that brightness is brighter than what you're going to get in a C3, right? The C3 won't get as bright. Now the QM8 is as bright, but you're losing some of that shadow cover, the cloud cover, and the U7K actually looks very similar to the QM8. And the Q7, it feels the least, it has the least dynamic range in the scene because you only have so many dimming zones, right? There's only so much you can do, but hey, it's trying, right? Can't hold it against the guy for trying. So there, I'll give you more detail. So you see there's a bit more, the most cloud cover with the most brightness, the most dynamic range, the G3, of course, but that's what you're shooting for. All these three TVs are trying to be more like an OLED, with the QM8 having the most dimming zones. That's why it's the closest. The U7K and the Q7, this scene, very close, but U7K clouds slightly darker because I guess more dimming zones, right? This is a scene where everything looks very similar, so no big deal here. Same, looks great. All three is fine. Same here. Oh, great one. Okay, I'm going to ask you guys to remember this scene, and I'll tell you why. When we go into Dolby Vision, you'll see the differences. It's pretty drastic. So, stop the touch. Okay, so that sunset, obviously on the G3, you get the most brightness, right? That pop, it's the brightest, that specular highlight is the brightest. QM8 is just behind, and then the U7K and the Q7, very similar, but the Q7 has more contrast. Its shadow detail in the rocks on the bottom right-hand corner more closely matches the G3 and QM8 than the U7K, and this is why I'm saying this is pretty impressive. The Q7 is able to do this. So I'll turn up exposure and look at the amount of shadow detail on the bottom right-hand corner of this scene relative to the QM8 and the, okay, so obviously the QM8 has more shadow detail than the other two, more dimming zones. G3 is the standard of how dark can it get in this bright sunrise, sunset, and I think the Q7 is just a step better than the U7K in this scene, right? It's the contrast is just a little bit better. It's still close, but this is why people pay more for the QM8 though. The QM8, the darkest part of that scene, it more closely resembles the G3 by, I'd say, a couple of steps over the other two. Now, remember the scene, because when we get to Dolby Vision, it looks completely different. This one is a pretty stark reminder that we don't have an OLED. That's why I like this scene. Okay. So again, the G3, this is what you can do. You have a gradient of bright to dark, and it's very smooth on the G3. On the U7K and the Q7, the U7K is bright, but it's clipped some of that shadow, and that's because I have dynamic tone mapping off. If I turn it, or on, if I turn dynamic tone mapping off on the U7K, I'll get all that shadow back, but it's just not as bright. So I rather get that HDR impact, and same with the Q7, right? I'm getting that HDR impact. So in this one, it's just a choice of, okay, I like what the Q7 is doing or the U7K. I don't think there's a wrong answer here. It's just preference, but I wanted to show you what it can do. And I think the QM8 is most similar, turn on exposure touch, most similar to the G3. I mean, close, but not quite. Oops. All right. And this one, all the TVs look pretty good, so we're not going to spend too much time with this scene. Ah, it's a good scene. So the G3 has the same brightness, but there's a lot of detail in that sun. And if I turn it up, or turn down exposure touch, I don't know if you guys can catch it because the resolution needs to be a little bit closer. So the brightness on the G3 matches the brightness of the TVs. However, the Q7 clips all of that detail. Right? You have this bright sunrise, but then there's not much there around the sun. There's actually a lot of cloud detail in the sun. The QM8 preserves some of that, but because it's trying to hit that brightness, it also clips it. But it clips it, I'd say, the same as the U7K. So in this case, the U7K actually did a pretty good job. But again, these are subtleties. It's you don't know what you're missing, but just to give you guys an FYI, it's not bad. The rest of the scene, very similar. It's just when you go to the hardest part of the scene, where that sun is rising, you're going to get some of that lost detail, or lose some of that detail. I think. How great is that? All four TVs look so similar. Another one. This is just. You can see. Let's see here. In the past, the contrast on the OLEDs really stand out because it still does here. So look at the rock on the bottom left-hand corner, right? The minute detail of that rock is most evident on G3. It feels like it's a higher resolution TV. It's still 4K. This is why I say contrast is more important than 8K pixels, right? If you were to choose between infinite contrast and 8K, always go with infinite contrast first, then get yourself an 8K OLED. But getting an 8K LCD TV it's actually less resolving power because the contrast does not match. So in this case, the G3 looks like it's higher resolution than that giant stone on the bottom left hand than the others, but the reality is it's just because the contrast is there. So let me try to lower the exposure a bit so you guys can see that. Probably kind of hard to on YouTube, obviously, but I'll do what I can. Maybe this is good. Yeah, this is about right. There's just more speckle on the G3, and a lot of that speckle's washed out on all of the other three TVs. Now, if you're out of HDR mode and in SDR mode, maybe some of the speckle will be back, but then you lose dynamic range. So this is why, if you're going for resolution, always hit infinite contrast before you get more pixels, always. In the shootout that we've had at Valley Electronics, where you have the 8K shootout, and everyone's saying, oh, how great is that Z2 8K TV? And I would have said if you put out a 4K TV against the 8K TVs, that would also win. The Z2 did not win because it was 8K. The Z2 beat out the Z9K and the QM900B simply because it was an OLED. It would have won if it was a 4K OLED, but we never had a chance. We might do it this year. Okay, so let's check out, let's see if I move this over. There we go. Okay, let's see how blooming is. Now, the G3 on the top left-hand corner, obviously there should be no blooming, so you get to see perfect blacks relative to everybody else, right? And this is not bad. So look at this. I've overexposed it, and look how close all the three TVs are to the G3. And what's amazing is the Q7 doesn't have as many dimming zones, and it looks really good. Now, it doesn't get as bright as the QM8. So you see the QM8 is the brightest, but you see the QM8, it's also, we talked about over-tracking EOTF, right? The Q7 actually is most similar to the G3. So in this scene, I'm like, wow, if I looked at this, I'd say, oh, the Q7 has more dimming zones. It doesn't. It has what, 150, 160 dimming zones? Is crazy. So I love it. This is where the Q7 really impressed me. And then we turn up exposure even higher. Okay. How crazy is it that the Q7 has the blackest blacks of the three non-OLED TVs? This is a winning moment for the Q7. I'm just so impressed. And I think the QM8 can stand to learn from the Q7, right? And so, yeah, that's just so incredible. All right, let's move on. So this is one where the QM8 has the most color, and the reason is because, well, actually, I don't know what the reason is. It's just the QM8 is preserving more color, has better color saturation. It is most similar to the G3, so for exposure touch. All right. The Q7 in this case doesn't have as much color saturation as the QM8. It's very similar to the U7K, but again, it's very subtle. But in this scene, the G3 has the most saturation, and because all four have been calibrated, we can argue that this is as accurate as it gets, even with calibration. You don't want to oversaturate. This is just how the scene appears, and the G3 represents the amount of color you should have in this scene. So the Q7, pretty impressive. QM8 is closest to the G3 in this case, though, but not bad. All four TVs look very similar, so we'll just skip this feather. And this one, also very good. G3 preserves most color in the cactus in this one, but it's so subtle still. How do we mention for you G3 fans out there, right? Let's get through that. It's a great scene because they all look so great. I just love, oh, here, this is a good one. So the specular highlight on the G3 is the brightest in this scene. There we go. That little bright bit of sunshine on that pedal, the G3 does that the best. And the other three TVs actually look the same, right? The differences in brightness is very subtle. I would expect a QM8 with 1,000 dimming zones to push the specular highlight just a bit, but it just doesn't do it. And this is often the weakness of LCD TVs. These specular highlights, they don't know when to do it and when not to. Oh, wow. This one, the G3 really pops. The bottom, the abdomen of that butterfly, I like this scene a lot because it's a bit brighter on the G3 and you see the contrast and it's pretty impressive. Whereas on the other butterflies on the Q7, QM8, and U7K, it looks like it's a one dynamic range, but the reality is it's a bit brighter on the G3. It pops a bit more, right? It's hard to see on YouTube, so just listen to what I say. Maybe not what you see necessarily. Looks very similar. Okay, this one I'm going to stop because, right here, the color of that violet flower on the bottom below the squirrel, it feels like the Q7 has a bit more contrast, a bit more saturation, closely matching the G3 and the QM8. This is where U7K loses a bit of that contrast. The QM8, because of its EOTF over tracking, it's a little bit brighter than it should be, where all the purple flowers are, or the violet flowers are. But hey, it's very pleasant. But the U7K, for the number of dimming zones it has, pretty impressive in this scene. So this one, bright red tulips. If I turn up the exposure, you'll see the contrast differences, right? So the G3 obviously will have the most contrast, the most dynamic range. The other TVs, when I turn up the exposure, you can see which one has the best contrast. And in this case, it appears that the QM8 is a touch better contrast, but the fact that the Q7 matches the U7K in its contrast in this scene is very impressive. And very impressive given the Q7 is 1/3 the number of dimming zones. So for sure, there's something to be said about software processing. Great scene for comparing the blooming issues, if any. So we'll check exposure. And once again, Q7, impressive, does very well with software processing. Now, it doesn't get as bright as the QM8, so that helps. QM8 is the brightest, so because it's so bright, is causing a bit of blooming. Now, it's not brighter than the G3. It matches the G3 in brightness in this case. Well, actually, it's slightly brighter, that EOTF curve thing again. So the QM8 is slightly brighter than the G3, but that's why its blooming is slightly worse. So had it been accurate, probably its blooming would not be so evident, but because the Q7 is not as bright, it actually doesn't bloom as much. That's something to think about. That's one reason why this scene, and this is why the Q7 is so smart. It doesn't get too bright, so its blooming is well controlled. Here we go, specular highlights. So the QM8 has the brightest, all the points of light, like that building on the bottom center there. QM8, very similar to the G3. G3 is the brightest, and then comes the QM8, and then the Q7, U7K are very similar. Now, as far as contrast, if I go turn up the exposure up good, you guys can see black level detail, all that good stuff. And this is pretty impressive because all the TVs are very close to the G3 in terms of black levels and shadow detail. In the past, it would not have been this close, and sadly the U7K looks like it struggles a little bit in contrast here. Again, almost 3 times more dimming zones than the Q7, yet not necessarily better, right? So bringing this to Hisense's attention, hopefully the U8K can redeem itself for the number of dimming zones that the U7K should perform a bit better. Well, motion, I would take the U7K, but then some people can live with a touch of soap opera. The Q7 is fine. So, you know, no TV is perfect. Gotta keep that in mind. Here we go. Okay. The QM8 specular highlight almost as bright as the G3, not quite, obviously. And the U7K is just a touch brighter, the center of the Ferris wheel, just a touch brighter than Q7. However, let's say we turn up the exposure, a couple of notches. And yes, once again, Q7 looks great with exposure turned up. Its blooming control is a match for the Q7, and even we go up to even higher. This is pretty good. I'm telling you, for under 200 dimming zones, I have not seen this level of blooming control. I think Samsung could learn something from the Q7. Very impressive. Well done. Right. Okay, so let me stop here and we will see what questions you guys got. All right, let's see. Let's hop back in. Hey, let's answer your questions real quick. Okay. Yes, I am doing solo. Thank you, Lisa. Hope everyone's been behaving. I've been generously giving out my moderator power so that you guys can keep an eye on each other. What? My mic is off? Okay. Is my mic still off? Am I whispering? It's like all this time I've been talking to myself and no one's heard me. Checking. Mic is dead. How long has it been dead? Did it just die? Did my mic just die? All right. All right. Oh my God. No one has heard anything for the last half hour. When I walk away, you cannot hear me? The heck? That is so weird. I have my lav on too. When I'm away, the mic is off. Okay, I apologize. See, this is why I have these testing sessions. Thankfully, my mic is being recorded. So when I repost this, you'll get all of my narratives with audio on. So that's another reason why I have to do what I have to do to find out. So when I walk away, the mic is off. That is so weird. When I leave the desk, you can't, you know what? It's maybe because my image disappears. What? Let me shrink myself. Okay, let's try this. I'm gonna walk away, testing, right? When I walk away, can you guys still hear me? Walking away. Can you all still hear me? I'm away now. So I learned something. If you guys can still hear me, that means I cannot take my image off because it kills the audio. Okay, can you guys hear me? When I walked away, did you hear me? Aha! This lav mic. See, that's crazy. Can you hear me now? Hear me now? You can't hear me now, and I'm in the scene? Nuts. All right. Let me double check. See. Oh, wait. You know what? Oh, this is terrible. Okay, let me try this. Okay, I know what happened. My bad. For whatever reason, this is so weird. So my MacBook mic is on, but my lav mic is off. So let me take a second to try and see if I can fix my lav mic real quick. Okay, we will be using the MacBook microphone. See, now I have to redo the audio. At least I got the video. Okay, I will have to stand in front of the laptop as I talk to you guys now. Thankfully, I have all my remote controls here. Okay, thank you guys. Just learn sign language. Yeah, that's going to work well. I love that. Thanks for the suggestion. Okay, yeah, Scott. So I figured it out. So apparently, my lav mic, which is connected to my camera, for whatever reason, it's not functioning. And is it possible that's disconnected? Well, you know what? I'll have to figure that later. Handle on. Oh, so disappointing. I'll have to figure out later. I'll have to troubleshoot another time. This is not a time to troubleshoot. Okay. But at least we have a contingency plan, which is the MacBook Pro. Sound is lower, but hear you with headphones. All right, let me see if I can turn up the sensitivity on that a little bit. Okay. Thank you for putting up with this. These are the reasons why I have to do what I have to do. Okay, quick recap. Thank you. Thank you, Mo. All right, so the Q7, amazing. In so many scenes, it matched the shadow detail of the QM8. It beats out the U7K in contrast, scene after scene. Specular highlights, obviously, is not a match for the G3 because it's an OLED, but it's so close. The QM8 does get brighter. Specular highlights is brighter, and contrast is brighter, but it was those select scenes. The mountains, but like the horses, you were able to see the backdrop behind almost as well as the QM8, if not as well. So for me right now, everything in HDR, even though the QM8 is slightly ahead, there are so many scenes where it matches the QM8 blow for blow that it's really hard to make the recommendation on the scenes that you saw for the QM8 unless you want an extra specular highlight, right? And which is, with the clouds, you have that extra, I guess the gradient detail. The QM8 is slightly better, but the QM8 doesn't come close to the OLED though. So the Q7, given less than 200 dimming zones, consistently better than the U7K, in contrast, matches the brightness of the U7K, and so closely matches the QM8. It is hard for me to justify recommending the QM8 because it's not that much better, just slightly. All right. Hopefully that recap helps, but we'll go out. And this is a good comment, Miyako Best Girl. I kind of want to see a QM8, QM90 or 95C shootout. I think you want to see a U8K QM90C, 95C shootout. This is why. The QM8, because it doesn't follow EOTF, what you're going to notice is that it will consistently be slightly brighter than the QM95C. And then you're going to say, oh, the QM8, it's brighter, right? I'm getting better contrast, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, it's because the QM8 doesn't follow the EOTF curve, and you cannot calibrate it down. And so if the 95C is accurate, you have a problem. So now you have to bump up the 95C with active mode, which brings in a different set of issues for the 95C. So in this case, the QM8 is the brightness maven's choice because you cannot necessarily fix it. And so it's not going to be a good comparison. When the U8K arrives, it could be tomorrow, the day after, sometime this week. We'll see how the U8K tracks EOTF out of the box versus the QM8. And, and if it's good, maybe that should be the one that we'll compare. So, yeah. All right, say hello. Hey, Dave Whelan. You came on just as my audio is working. All right. Red push on the QM8. Yeah, and so this is the thing, is Hisense, TCL, and to a certain degree, some, just some other brands, you're going to have this. It's color accuracy out of the box is not consistent. You always have panel variance, panel lottery. Some people are lucky and it's really close out of the box. Some people are not. So ultimately, the QM8 being a bit hard on the red push, that happened last year with my TCL. It happened the year before. And this year, it slightly happened. But now that it's calibrated, it's a little bit better. But obviously, you're not going to calibrate a QM8. But it's something that I had an issue last year with a Roku where in warm 2, it was too rich. In warm 1, it was too cool, or whatever it was. So there is no in between, unfortunately. Okay, let's see what is next up. HDR movies. Oh, yeah. All right, this time I'm going to be right here in front, but I will take this off. So bear with me for a second. I'm going to switch out and we'll try HDR movies. Entertain yourselves. Okay. All right, I'm back. Oh, you know what? I have a solution, I think, to the audio problem. I'm going to solve it right now. I forgot I have multiple lav mics or systems. So let me add a second one real quick. I will not be defeated. I will find a way. Life finds a way. Okay, we're going to use my wireless real mic. Let's see if this works better. Checking. Check, check, check. Check, 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 check. All right, this might work. But, oh, can you hear me now? I think you guys can hear me now, can't you? How's my audio? Checking. It looks like my audio is working. Check, 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 check. Audio is not working. I think I know what happened. Okay, so is the audio working? Yes? That is so weird. So my system mislabeled the source. The system labeled my other camera as the source of the mic when in actuality it's this one. Okay, well, we figured it out. So, all right, let's get this back up here. I apologize for that inconvenience, everyone. Look at it. Okay, all right, let's do HDR movies. Yeah, unfortunately I cannot. The MacBook Pro's microphone is only so-so. Okay, so let's see. Oops. Let me take myself off real quick. Hopefully you guys can still hear me after I'm off. Let me know if the audio shuts out. So I'm going to pause right here. Okay, is my audio working still even though I'm not in the scene? Checking audio, and it looks like it's working, but I want to make sure you guys can hear me. Hey Scott, just answering your question. So slow mode is on only means that you have to wait 30 seconds between messages, that's all. It's to prevent crazy spammers from taking control. So I apologize. Slow mode just means you have to wait 30 seconds in between messages, that's all. Am I far away from my desk? Here, I'm closer now. Is that better? Is that better? Okay, so let's do this. Okay, what I'm gonna do is, okay, so I'm gonna adjust I'm gonna find a part of the scene and adjust it so that, got it, okay. There we go, got it. Okay, so HDR scene, this is The Crimes of Grindelwald. Classically, I like this scene because it has so much detail, but so much specular highlights, and it allows you to separate the specular highlight and the contrast. Obviously, everyone notices the G3 is awesome, right? And this is why you get an OLED. But how close does a non-OLED get for 1/3, quarter the price? And let me adjust exposure so that it's a little bit more detail for you all. There we go. Okay. Now, the QM8 and the G3 are the brightest in this scene. The Q7 and U7K just a step behind, which is very interesting, right? You would think that LCD TVs are always bright. Not so. And because the G3 is accurate, meaning this is the brightness it should be, the Q7 U7K, there's a little ABL happening because they don't want to overbloom maybe, because look at the detail on the bottom right-hand corner, right? That bottom right-hand corner is where your contrast, your black levels, your shadow detail are. So if I increase the exposure, you guys can see how much contrast the four TVs have separating each other. I think this is a good one. So the QM8 is very similar to the G3. More dimming zones allows it to give you those black levels in that building. And the Q7, the U7K is a touch lifted. But isn't that crazy that the Q7 with less than 200 dimming zones? I know I harp on this, but this is where dimming zones are supposed to give you the advantage. And the QM8 does take advantage of that, but it has 1,000 dimming zones to get slightly better. Whereas the Q7 and the U7K, I would say, are nearly indistinguishable, despite the U7K having almost 3 times as many dimming zones. So this is impressive what the Q7 can do with less than 200 dimming zones. And of course the G3 is OLED. It should look awesome, right? Right, take the exposure down, then you can see the specular highlights compared. Now, of course, as I hold on to this scene, the let me push play. The G3 might dim because static content and so forth, right? So let's try to catch it again on the next round. If we hold on to a scene too long, we all know what ASBL does, right? Over time, it's going to think it's static and... Okay, so the G3 and the QM8, this is why you pay a little bit more for the QM8. It gets you that specular highlight, that brightness of the LG G3 for 1/3 the price. The G3 is MLA. It is 65 inches. It's over $3,000. The QM8 is just over $1,200. And so the impact is there. Now, the detail isn't, well, arguably the QM8 is slightly brighter, obviously, but we know why, right? It overtracks the OTF. But for this scene, doesn't matter. It just, the pop is there. The Q7 and the U7K feels like it's the dimmest of the 4, but barely, right? The Q7 is fairly good given its price point and given its processing. This is very good. So let's go to the next scene. You are not wrong, SB. But people want to save money. Come on, stop giving them FOMO. You're making my job so hard. Or you're making my job so easy, right? Stop the FOMO. Okay, so in this one, let's see if I can catch. Almost. There we go. Okay, so this is a great scene, mostly because you get to see the QM8 overtracking its brightness, its OTF, and the other TV is doing really well. And this is where the black bars come in. So this scene has black bars, and it feels like all 3 TVs, LCD TVs, QM8, Q7, and U7K, their black bars aren't bad, right? And this is what I'm seeing. In the past, you would see very lifted black bars because the flames are bright and it's on the edge of that black bar. So I'm going to turn up the exposure so you can see the separation. The U7K will have the most visible black bars though. I can still see it. I think at this exposure, you might see it better. Yeah, the U7K black bars are definitely a touch more lifted. Here, let me go a little higher than that. There we go. Okay, better. But how impressive is the Q7 with its black bars? Okay, so right here, this is where the Q7 makes its money. It has black bars that are almost, not quite, but almost as dark as the QM8, but definitely less lifted than the U7K in terms of the black bars. And the U7K, it's evenly lifted, right? There's no blooming per se in specific parts of the black bar, but the Q7 is also evenly darker. And normally I would not expect it from 200 dimming zones, but in this case, here it is. And the G3 represents perfect black bars. So the G3 is just black. QM8 is close. Not bad at all, but you can also see the contrast on the G3, even hyper-exposed, right? The G3 shows it has the most contrast. So I often like to overexpose these scenes so you can separate the contrast. The G3 is an OLED. OLEDs have this contrast while matching the brightness. And QM8 is a close second. However, it's over tracking OTF, so the jacket is brighter than it should be. And of course, U7K and Q7, the contrast is very similar. So if I take down the exposure, you guys will see how the QM8 is slightly brighter than it should be because the G3 represents what an accurate luminance is for this, right? So the jacket is slightly brighter, his face is slightly brighter. So people will say, oh, the QM8's brighter. It's a great TV. It's just a little less accurate. So what's interesting, someone's out the front door. So what's interesting is the Q7 is similar to the G3 when you take it down to normal exposure, but the G3 still has the best contrast. But the QM8 is trying to get there by making it slightly overbrightened. So I can see what it's doing. It's a very good strategy. It looks good. I'm not going to complain, but it's just so you guys know, it looks good because it has to do something to make up for the difference that it doesn't have self-emissive pixels. Okay, so let's go to the next scene. And this is where OLED separates itself. Oh yeah. Look at the brightness on the G3 of that star at the bottom part of her hat. So the Q7 is the least bright, then the U7K, then the QM8, and of course the G3 is the brightest. And by the way, the C3 will look just the same, right? You have to have OLED to get that bright. The A80K, the A80J, they will always have that slight brightness advantage. And in this case, maybe less dimming zones. That's why the Q7 might be the dimmest. The U7K is pretty good. What's crazy is U7K matches or possibly slightly brighter than the QM8. See if I can find a way to demonstrate that. Because in my earlier comparisons, it feels like the Q7 or the U7K specular highlights actually is a touch brighter. But this is what we're talking about. When you are aggressively tone mapping to avoid lifted blacks, you're going to end up slightly dimming these specular highlights. That's a trade-off. The question is it worth the trade-off for you guys, right? Is it worth slightly dimmer specular highlights, but then the blacks are really good? Black levels and the contrast, everything feels like it pops. Whereas the U7K, it's slightly brighter here, but then it's got slightly lifted blacks on the black bars, right? And this is something that Sony struggles with. Samsung does not struggle with this because it's made its decision. Samsung will crush blacks slightly to get you perfect black bars. There's no negotiation. Last year they tried the Q90B, last year the Q90B, they tried to give it that specular highlights. What happened? Lifted black bars, people complained, and so Q95C, double the dimming zones, so they're back to what they should want to do, which is specular highlights, and try not to crush it too much to give you that specular highlight. So this is the compromises you have if you go mini LED or LCD TV. This is a great scene to demonstrate that. See, then the QM8 really pops here. The dimming zones make a difference. So here the QM8 wins against the Q7, the U7K. It is definitely brighter, and if anything, it's slightly brighter than G3, but could it be because it's over tracking OTF? Probably, because her face is slightly brighter as well. But hey, you know what? It looks good. This is what QM8 has to do to compete, and it does it. Let's go to this next scene. So this one, we're going to compare the average picture level in terms of full screen brightness, because there are some movies where it's really bright, and the question is, I'll turn down the exposure just a touch so you guys can see and compare. Okay, so obviously here's where the G3 is always going to struggle, right? It's bright and it looks good, but it's just not as bright. Looking at Keanu's face, it just cannot get the whole scene as bright as a QM8, but the difference isn't huge. People do want a bright TV in a bright room, but I have to say, the G3 accounts well enough that I would not make the decision on full screen brightness based on this scene. And this scene is actually pretty bright. We'll see the difference in SDR sports later, but for movies, the G3 is absolutely fine. And of course, the Q7, U7K, bright enough. a match for the QM8. So if you're watching full screen content, there's no reason to get the QM8 because it looks so similar to the Q7 is so similar to the QM8 in terms of overall brightness for movies. Shouldn't be a big deal. Oh yeah, thank you everyone for showing me love. Press like. And I will have to redo the audio on this. Hey, thanks for putting up with all the technical difficulties. That's awesome. Yeah, the QM8 does look good, Asaf. It is a bright TV. And as this scene goes on and on, the QM8's brightness and its ability to maintain that brightness, it shows, right? It shows. Okay, so here's everyone's favorite scene, the fire guitar. And I'll turn up the exposure real quick. All right. Okay. What a great scene for all 4 TVs. So the G3 represents the perfect amount of contrast. Where it should be dark, it is dark. Where it should be bright, it is bright. All 4 are calibrated. So the question is, between the other 3 TVs, are they close enough for you to choose and save, what, G3 is $3,500, Q7 is $800? I mean, isn't that crazy that the Q7 comes that close? Now I'm going to turn on the exposure so you can see the differences in contrast where the speakers are, right? So where the speakers are, there are areas of the speakers that are perfectly black, almost black, and see which one comes the closest to doing that. So not bad. The Q7, not bad. U7K, the black bars are coming out, slightly lifted, but I'm sorry, TCL, you did too good of a job with the Q7. I'm having a hard time recommending the QM8 in just regular movie watching because it is so good. The Q7 with, I think they're lying when they say there's like only 100 so many dimming zones. This looks so good for an LCD TV that is just barely $800. Look how close it gets to the G3 in this scene. This is a very hard scene, by the way, and the G3 obviously has better contrast, but come on, right? Very impressive. What a great scene. All right. So remember the clouds from the Spears and Munsell? This is real movie content that does use the clouds for specular highlights. And so the G3 represents that full dynamic range, right? The darkest part of the scene under his chin and the brightest part of the scene just above his chin. The G3 renders that perfectly. That's how it should look. The question is, what about the other 3 TVs? So the QM8 slightly overtracks the OTF, so it gets those bright points, but look, oh, you know what? It's not clipping, it's just overtracking. Let me turn down the exposure so you guys can see it. There we go. Okay. So the QM8 is a little bit brighter than it should be. So you see it, right? In certain parts of the scene, it's really bright, but it's trying to make up that difference by not having even 1,000 dimming zones. It's not enough. It needs more dimming zones, but then any more, it'll cost as much as the QM8, right? So might as well get the QM8. So, but look at the Q7 and the U7K, very close, and it doesn't overtrack as much as the QM8. So this is a good scene. In the past, LCD TVs would not even get close to any of these 3 TVs, right? Like the Q90R could not do this scene this well. I remember when I did the Q90R, and the Q7, if you can believe it, his matching and exceeding the Q90R, which is only, what, 3.5 years old, right? So this is so impressive what TCL and Hisense, to a certain degree, have done, because both of them look very similar in the scene. Actually, the U7K is not under his chin, is actually better shadow detail, near level accuracy as the LG G3. The Q7 is a touch lifted under his chin, but we're talking pixel luminance peeping right now, right? So this is how the LCD TVs compare to the OLED G3 with MLA. Without MLA, it will not get as bright in those specular highlights. That's a very bright specular highlight. We're talking way over 1,000 nits, and the C3 cannot break 1,000 nits in that specular highlight, and so that's why you get the G3. It's for the impact of this scene. Q7 though, you're clipping those details. U7K, you're clipping it, and the QM8, you're clipping it compared to what the LG G3 is able to do. And I have dynamic tone mapping on, as a reminder. If I had it off, you would even get this level of contrast. So that's a pretty good scene for that comparison. All right. So this is pink clouds. Who's into pink clouds? All right. This is brightness comparison right here. Full screen brightness, and all the TVs do this pretty well. So no complaints here. The key is this scene right here. With the fluorescent lights, it's a bright scene with an even brighter specular highlight. This is where LCD TVs should be, they should have the advantage. And the QM8 should be the most brightest impact in this scene. So as you get inside the store, pause it right there. So as expected, the QM8 is a touch brighter all around, but then it's slightly over tracking OTF. The G3 MLA, this is what it was designed to do. And the Q7, the U7K come close, but surprisingly cannot get that specular highlight as bright because the contrast is not there. It should be able to lower the areas between the fluorescent light so that there's that dynamic range difference, but it just can't because it's so bright. There's not enough dimming zones to do that. I'm going to lower the contrast a touch to see if I can separate the TVs a bit more this way. And yeah, the specular highlights on the Q7 and the U7K just cannot do that. QM8 comes closest, but then it lifts that area between the fluorescent lights just a bit, right? No perfect TV, but this is where you pay the big bucks for either the S95C, the S90C, or the G3. Not trying to convince you to buy them, but rather how far apart, what separates $2,000, right? The $2,000 separation between the G3 and the Q7, the U7K, those are around 800, 850. The QM8's around 1,200 or so, and the G3 is around 3,500. These subtle scenes are where it's at. So you guys know what you're missing out on or not. Let's move on to the next one. Everyone's favorite scene. So this is a very bright scene, one of the first bright HDR scenes that we use for comparisons. Try to get, there we go. Okay, I think, the exposure nailed it. So the QM8 and the Q7 and the U7K, they try to get that sunlight as bright as the G3, but in doing so, what happens? You clip some of that detail. What surprises me is the QM8 is only brighter than the Q7, but it's not bringing any of that detail back, right? But it is a touch brighter. Actually, the whole scene in the QM8 is a touch brighter, but it's a little over tracking, but by doing that, it's able to match the G3. Q7, U7K, the whole scene doesn't get bright enough because, well, it feels like it doesn't get bright enough. The reality is the contrast isn't there. When a scene is that bright, it cannot enforce the contrast. The Q7, not enough dimming zones. U7K, not enough dimming zones. And the QM8, barely enough dimming zones. And it has to overtrack just to get that sense of impact. And the G3 delivers the impact in full while preserving the darker areas of the scene. So I'm going to lower the exposure a touch so you guys can get a feel for this. Yeah, so this is one of those money scenes where HDR is defined by the TVs that can do it. The S95C, perfect match for the G3. S90C, also a match for this scene. LCD TVs, QM8 comes the closest, but where are your shortcomings, right? It's a great scene. I love this scene for that. Right. Is this the last scene? Let's see. Here we go. Shadow detail and processing. We are going to get to the weakness of the G3 here, actually. Let me turn up the exposure a bit. Okay, I'm going to overexpose it just a touch so you guys can see the differences in processing. And so this is one where LG WOLED is struggling, right? They need to fix that. What you're going to see is that pulsing, otherwise known as chrominance overshoot, but there's actually two issues. One is it's unable to get the color right, and so it's jumping from red to white. And the other is it's near black pulsing issue, right? So whatever the issue is, G3 has suffered from this for years, but this is a unique scene that brings it out. It's not always there. But I'm impressed that the Q7 is doing really well with its new processor, because it feels that the Q7 and the QM8 is probably sharing the same processor. And the U7K I know shares that processor with the U8K. So this is a really good scene. So this one, the QM8, slightly overtracks. That's why you're clipping a bit of her facial features, but partly because overexposed. Let me take it down a touch. All the TV looks pretty good. The U7K though, it loses out in contrast just a touch here. Oh, lost video. 1 second. I think I have to replace my battery. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back on. I didn't realize I was going that long. Battery's supposed to last a bit longer than that. Okay, so when we get to the last part of that scene, I'm going to have to catch it faster. This is where we compare the shadow detail in these darker scenes. So there are movies, horror movies and the like, where you have a lot of detail in the shadows. The question is, does the Q7 crush that black to the point where you're like, you know what, I watch a lot of these movies. Maybe I don't want the Q7. Oh, see, I'm talking too much. I just missed it. I have one more shot at it. All right, gotta focus, focus. As you get to that scene, I'll get it, and no! All right, let's try that again. Can I go back? Is there, okay, here we go. All right. I pushed the wrong button. I pushed fast forward. I jumped to Superman. Okay. Unlike my Panasonic, I cannot go frame by frame, so I have to have perfect timing. See? Oh, well. I was just going to say, no. Oh, here we go. I think I got it now. This is terrible. I have the Blu-ray too. It's like playing a video game. Aha, caught it. Okay. All right. So let's turn up the exposure. So the Q7 doesn't crush the blacks that much. As a matter of fact, the Q7, U7K, and the QM8 does a great job with near black shadow detail. So the compromises aren't that great in terms of crushed blacks. This is what impresses me. They do crush it a touch, but in this scene, you can't tell that it does at all. So this is a great bravo to both TCL and Hisense for getting it near OLED-like, if not OLED-like shadow detail, and you're not crushing anything. So an excellent scene. For those of you who watch horror movies and the like, you can feel confident that the Q7, even if it does crush it, it's not to the point where it's going to be worse than an OLED, right? And okay, this one, I'm going to expose it up so you guys can see the difference in contrast, and then we should be good. Okay, so this scene is already overexposed to the touch. The contrast difference between the QM8 and the G3, I think they're nearly indistinguishable. This is a great scene because it's shadow detail, very similar to the G3. The Q7 and the U7K arguably a touch behind in contrast. Actually, the U7K may be the worst, a touch worse than the other two. And if anything, it's slightly lifted near where under his armpit, under the shoulder pads. So let me turn up the exposure a bit so you guys can see this even better. Okay, that'll work. So the Q7, the G3, and the QM8, below that shoulder pauldron, I guess, a deeper black, but for whatever reason, the U7K slightly lifts it. So, you know, it does have a lifting issue. I think Hisense in this scene, I'll probably send it to them so they can address it. But if they can get their software to maybe get it more accurate, it actually may take care of the lifted black bars as well. And you can see the black bars on the left and right on the U7K a bit better. And the QM8, of course, the best black bars because it has the most dimming zones, but the Q7, very close. So yeah, I'm just so impressed by what TCL has done with the Q7. And oh, crazy. Let me turn down exposure for this scene. Okay, normally in these super bright flash scenes, the G3 is able to preserve the deep shadow detail compared to the brightest part. And the fact that all three LCD TVs come so close in this super bright scene shocks me that the Q7 could do this with so few dimming zones. Because behind Superman, that black area should be much more lifted than it is, honestly. So this is very impressive. I mean, I cannot say enough about how good the Q7 is so far in the comparisons that we have. Let's see. I'm going to raise exposure a touch on this one. So I've raised exposure and even the darkest areas of the scene. The G3, okay, so G3 is slightly dimmer, obviously. This is really bright. The ABL prevents it from holding on to that brightness. But look at the darkest part of the scene, though. All three TVs, this is the LCD TV thing right now, they are doing a phenomenal job getting very close to OLED contrast in these challenging scenes. Let me increase, yeah, so this is overexposed, and the differences are very minimal between an OLED and a non-OLED. I mean, you don't normally have this close of a competition, but I'm very impressed with how far LCD TVs have come. Okay, I'm going to jump back in, answer your questions, see what you guys got. Yes, the G3 will always have slightly more detail, as you've noticed, Lisa. And this is where the enthusiast, the critical consumer comes in, right? You know it's there. You just want to make sure it's always there. You never have to wonder, is there detail there or not? Getting a G3, an S95C, and S90C, you know it's there. If it's supposed to be there, it's there, right? Nothing is made up. There's no crushing or anything like that. But for those who want to get close and save a little money, I think the Q7 and the U7K and the QM8, they all do well. But the fact that the Q7 costs $50 less than the U7K is quite impressive. Quite impressive indeed. The QM8 looks so pink, and so part of this is my camera, the way it captures color. Try not to compare the colors, because you have two problems. One, the LG G3 with WOLED is going to look a little bit bluer, as you can see with this title page. The Grindelwald looks a bit bluer on the G3. And actually, it is bluer. Might as well. But WOLED makes it all the worse. The white point for the QM8 and the TCL Q7, that's just how it's going to be after calibration. But my camera is shifting it possibly to make it look pinker than it is. And the U7K, it looks a touch greener than it is. And that's just, by the time it gets to YouTube and out to you guys, it may even look worse than it should look. So ultimately, try not to make a decision based on the color differences, because they are calibrated. And so when you get it home, it'll look nothing like what I have. So if you even see that pink on mine, you may not get it. You might have a different push, right? So there's just something to keep in mind. So that's a good point. All right, let's see what's up next on our list. Oh yes, since we're here, let's do a little Dolby Vision comparison. So 1 second here, let me swap my source. What I'm gonna do is, 1 second. All right, on to Dolby Vision. So we're going to turn on Dolby Vision decoding. There we go. So now you guys are going to see with 10,000 nit grade Dolby Vision, the G3 represents the most advanced Dolby Vision processor out there. I think it does it really well, and it's also been calibrated to do Dolby Vision perfectly. So we'll see how it compares to Q7, U7K, and QM8 Dolby Vision out of the box. And I'm going to show you my Dolby Vision settings as well, so you guys can see. All right, let's pause right here. Okay. So U7K Dolby Vision Dark is its most accurate setting, but we'll also, here we go, Dolby Vision Dark right here. Okay, it's on dark. Let me see, you guys can see that setting. The G3 is just on Cinema Dolby Vision. Oops. There you go, Dolby Vision, Cinema, which is equivalent to Dolby Vision Dark. Q7. Dolby Vision dark. Now, there's a limit to what you can adjust. I'm looking for the, it's not easy to find. I'm trying to get to the sensor. If I can find it, great. If not, oh well. That's audio, picture. Huh. I know where the sensor is on the U7K, I guess. Maybe there are no auto detect. Here we go. Nope, nope. Adjust according to the received signal. Nope. Okay, so let's just compare real quick then. Dolby Vision IQ, slightly brighter all around. So if you're in a bright room, this is why you use it, but we're not in a bright room, we're in a dark room. And then this will give you the most accurate Dolby Vision. It gives you the most contrast as well. If you go to Dolby Vision IQ, you're gonna lose contrast because everything is brighter, including the darker areas of the scene. So Dolby Vision Dark gives you the most accurate image. And the U7K, similarly. Oops. Okay, here, I'm going to turn on the automatic light sensor temporarily so you guys can see. So it lifts it slightly, but as you can see, it's just everything feels like SDR. So I'm not a fan of that. And I'm going to turn off the automatic light sensor. Okay, so all 4 TVs are in Dolby Vision Dark. And it is a Dolby Vision 10,000 nit content. But as you can see, this is, let me take myself off. There we go. Okay, so with Dolby Vision on, it makes sure you get all the shadow detail. But let me adjust exposure just a touch. Okay, all 4 TVs look nearly identical, right? So Dolby Vision kind of enforces a uniform look, which could be good or could be bad. In this case, it's great. I'm getting all the detail that I may have lost if it was straight up 2000 nit content. Remember this scene, how difficult it was for all the TVs to have the same contrast as the G3? So here's the issue, right? The G3 I thought looked better because it really popped in this scene. Let me turn down. Okay. And yet now it's been pulled back a touch. You're not getting that full HDR impact. Whereas the Q7 and the U7K and the QM8, they all look very similar. So on the one hand, it's great, but are you holding back the TVs, right? For the G3, I would say you are. And for the Q7, it only goes downhill from here with Dolby Vision in some of these scenes. It simply is not a good enough TV. This is a great scene for Dolby Vision though, because you want all that black background detail, right? I'm going to go straight to the scene that I think Dolby Vision actually harms the creator's intent. Because the creator's intent is for what you're seeing on the G3. Oh, but this is a good one. All the shadow details there. Oops, let's go back. Okay, so remember how a lot of that shadow detail is clipped on the U7K, the Q7, and the QM8? Well, it's all here, but then that peak brightness isn't there. So the question is, and there's no right answer, by the way, it's preference, but you have to know what Dolby Vision brings to the table. What it brings you is that additional cloud cover detail or the details in the clouds, but you're not getting that HDR impact that you had with HDR10. And I can shift it right now to HDR10 so you guys will see the difference on the fly. Okay, so the QM8, even though it's only 1,000 nits, the QM8 definitely feels like it has more pop. And, well, obviously because it's over tracking OTF to a certain degree. But let me go up. Okay, 2,000 nits. There we go. Okay, the G3 really pops here, even though it's only 2,000 nits, right? I think the G3 at 2,000 nits is brighter than Dolby Vision at 10,000 nits. And I see it right here. You guys can see it. And it still preserves all that cloud content, the cloud detail, except it's just the dynamic range looks so good in Dolby Vision, in HDR 2000, not Dolby Vision, right? But going to Dolby Vision, so let me just go to Dolby Vision real quick. Slight differences. And we're going to go to this next scene. This is probably the worst. This one's good, actually. So this Dolby Vision, I have no complaints. It's the one with the sunset in the canyon. Right here. Okay. Oh, look at the U7K and the Q7. Like you could barely see the sun. Obviously, the G3 looks phenomenal. It looks great in Dolby Vision because, you know, the G3 has the headroom. So this is where I was saying, if your TV isn't good enough, Dolby Vision is not going to look good on your TV. The QM8 is closer to the G3, but if I just convert it to, let's say, just 2,000 nit content, right, the same scene, look at the Q7 and the U7K. Look how that sun pops. And so this is the issue. For those of you who are shopping Dolby Vision TVs and it's under $1,000 or less than the QM8, it's not going to have that HDR impact. It just is not. You're not going to get that pop right there, what you see. And so, and this applies to all lower end TVs that doesn't have the headroom. The QM8 has the headroom, so it looks okay in both, right? And of course, the G3 has the headroom, so it looks almost the same either way. And this is only 2,000 nit content, right? So this is where I have my argument that Dolby Vision, more often than not, looks very similar to HDR, so whatever. But then in the scenes where your TV isn't good enough, it actually doesn't allow your TV to perform as it should. So you know what? It is what it is, right? But you guys got to know at least this is what you're getting with Dolby Vision out of the box. Now, the G3's Dolby Vision has been calibrated to make sure that it serves as a benchmark, but the QM8, U7K, and Q7 is not calibrated Dolby Vision because I want it to represent what you guys get when you get out of the box. And it looks pretty good in HDR, 2000 nit. But when you go to Dolby Vision, it is definitely a step down. So let me check questions, see if you have any questions about Dolby Vision before we move on to the next one. Hey, thanks for joining us, Chris. How's it going? Sorry I missed the beginning. Oh, you know what? You just missed me not having audio. So I'm gonna have to repost this with my full audio and my voiceover later. Hey, but thanks for putting up with this. Okay, so getting U8K for unboxing. Oh yeah, you're gonna love. Well, I don't have it yet. I should get it in a few days, and I'll let you guys know how great it is. QM8 is good. The Q7 is very close. I say it'll be between the Q7, QM8, and U8K for many people. And I expect the 4th of July sale, Leo, is not going to be as good as the Prime Day sales. So those of you shopping TVs, whether it's 2023 or 2022 models, Prime Day or leading up to Prime Day, sometimes Best Buy likes to get the jump on Prime Day. But yeah. And yes, the QM8 is a good TV. There's no doubt about it. So can't go wrong there. But U8K, I would like you to wait for that as well before you decide. This is a great comment, Isaiah. Purchase the Q7. Love the picture. But thought I jumped the gun. I returned it, got the UAH. It went on sale. When it went on sale in Best Buy, instant regret. The Q7 processing is better than the U8H. I mean, if you're watching sports, full screen content, U8H is great. It's brighter. It has better specular highlights. But the Q7 overall is the better TV. So if you saw my comparisons, you'll see that. Okay, just going through all your comments real quick. Yes, the G3 is 2.5 times more than the QM8, and it's very close. The question is it close enough for you, right? All right. And okay, well, when am I going to get the Q8K? Sometime this week. Hisense says it's en route, so I'm hoping to get it tomorrow, the day after. Sometime this week, I will have it, and we'll do an immediate comparison. I'll take the G3 off, and I'll have the U8K on top, where the G3 is right now. You'll get a four-way with the best LCD TVs of this year. Or I just might replace the U7K and put the U8K right there, because I think the U7K is just not competing well right now with the Q7. Okay, so yeah, let's move on. Let's see what's up. Oh, PS5 gaming. Let's try that. I'll be right back. Change my source real quick. Okay, so this is I think they're all automatically switching to game mode, but we're going to double check the settings for you guys. I really do like what Hisense and TCL has done this year with their game bar. So we're going to explore that so you guys can see. I really like the TCL game bar a lot. So one of the advantages of this game bar, and I have to figure out if TCL does this, but I really like how you can throw up the FPS viewing, right? So if I click on, you get to see 120 FPS mode. So this is great. Yes, it is. All three TVs have full 4K 120. So none of that half resolution anymore. I think we've gone beyond that. And so starting with the U7K, this dark detail is actually shadow detail. So if you want to see more shadow, you turn it on, you notice how everything lifts a little bit. I leave it off. I like the contrast. This is just widescreen or direct screen. And FreeSync on off, brightness at 100. High refresh mode, I don't think this game is going to require that, so you guys can play with that. And then you have the menu that takes you to different picture modes. I have it in filmmaker mode. And let's put back the menu so you guys can compare it to the other ones real quick. Okay, now what I like about the Q7, okay, so first you can choose between 3 different looks, right? The original is what I think is the most accurate, but then you have FPS, it's a bit cool, RPG, original, play with it. Original has the most contrast and it has the most accurate color. I like this a lot, shadow enhancement. So where the Hisense is an on-off for shadow detail, here you can slowly increase shadow detail by levels up to 9. This is impressive. So depending on the game, I like to keep it off because I like to max out contrast, but some games you want to see shadow detail. So this is really cool. Bravo TCL for thinking of that. Of course, you have the aiming aid, and we're not going to use this for this game. And with menu, then you go to HEIG, turn on or off. Turning it on makes it a touch brighter, so I'll just turn it on so you guys can see. And that's that. I actually think the image quality of the Q7 in game mode may even look better than the QM8, if that's possible. Whoops. So same, right? FPS. Oh, that's just washed out. Yeah, original still the best. Shadow details off. Menu, HGIG. I want to turn it off. Interestingly, HGIG makes the Q7 a little bit brighter. HGIG makes it a little bit washed out on the QM8 and a little bit darker. So I'm going to keep it off. But you guys can play with that. This is just give you some comparisons to play with, right? And the PS5 was, the HDR was calibrated to the Q7 and the QM8. Let's put it on Cinema Home so it gets a little bit brighter. Oh, it's too bright. Too bright. I'm trying to... Okay, Game Optimizer is fine. Oh, there we go. HIG, let's do that. And I do like Expression Enhancer. Okay. Now, this is not a full game. It's just me trying to show you and taking a tour of how things could look, right? So let's see how we do here. And I'm just going to stop right here and maybe look up a little bit. Okay, so I have to say the image quality it is such an improvement over the past. I'm so impressed with what TCL and Hisense has done. Obviously G3 looks great, but come on, Q7, $800. Could this be the gaming TV of 2023 for under $800? Just look at the Q7, you know? It's like, wow. Okay. I'm going to go into nighttime so you guys can see the black, like the deep blacks. This is just right here so you guys can see the differences in the contrast, but this is more than playable. And with the game bar, what a game changer, right? So I'll creep in here. So as you can see on the G3, shadow detail is a little bit darker. Everything's a little bit lifted on the Q7, but this is still a pretty decent gaming TV. The C3 is going to be very similar to the G3 in this respect. Okay, so let me get out of here. Okay. Okay, let me go into nighttime mode. So you can see the black levels on this. Here we go, nighttime. I like the rain so you can see the specular highlights. Look how good it looks, right? Okay, I really like the lights above. I'm gonna pull back just a touch. You know what, there's a better scene. Let me go over here. So pay attention to the black levels on the Q7 as well as the QM8. Are you getting better contrast with 3 times the dimming zones? Right there. So on the G3, each individual light can be easily seen. So I'll turn on exposure. So on the G3, each individual light can be easily seen, right? And with the Q7 not having enough dimming zones, it's still there, but it's kind of blurring into each other. The U7K has better definition between those lights above, right, in the very top. And the QM8 is the brightest, but also definition. But the G3 is obviously that. You can see every individual light. And this is what you're paying extra for. And the C3 would be very similar, is you get an OLED for both low latency and these little specular details, if that's important to you. But overall gaming experience, they're all, I mean, 4K 120, the resolution is great, the contrast is there, it's $800, that's the Q7, $850 for the U7K, and the QM8 gets you the extra HDR punch. But these three TVs, QM8, Q7, and U7K, is such a step above what I've seen before from Hisense and TCL. And I love that you have little things like on the U7K, you have the FPS status bar on the bottom, you could toggle it on or off. And I love the game bars. The game bars on this is very usable. I mean, look at the black levels. In the past, oh, it's just that dark scene right there. Okay, so behind the car, that is what I'm talking about, black levels, before it'd be a lot more washed out. So I'm going to turn up the exposure so you guys could compare. This is pretty good. Now, obviously, G3 has the best contrast, but would you expect this of an $800 TCL Q7? I definitely would not have, but moving forward, I'm going to expect it now. And another battery switch, 1 second. And we're back. And taking the exposure down, you can see between the lights what the resolution looks like. Great. Okay, let me pop in real quick, answer any questions you may have, if there's any. I know this feels like a pitch for the G3, right? But for $3,500, it better be good. And it would actually be the S95C if I had the 65-inch, but I have the 77, so I thought it was easier to capture it as a 65-inch. So it's more apples to apples, because sometimes size makes a big difference. Lisa says, can I say this is so fun to watch? Lisa, you can say that all day long. And I have to say, I did not expect that comment, but it is welcomed. Thank you, everyone. We're going to move to sports next, but I want to make sure you guys have any questions here. But I have to say, Leo, and I know you're a TV gamer, isn't it amazing where we are today, where an $800 TV can look pretty good? You don't have to pay extra for an OLED. Now, I know latency in the OLED will be better. So if you guys like first-person shooter, the kind of games where you need that extra millisecond, I get it. But for the casual gamer that has a PS5 or an Xbox, I'm not disappointed, honestly. In the past, we had issues, right? Like, what happened with half resolution? You know, why is there all this terrible ghosting? Blah blah blah. A lot of that is better this year, for sure, for sure. Okay, let's move on. And yes, it's fun for me to be here too. Thank you for showing up, everyone. So next up, sports. So 1 second as I switch over. go. Oh, where I left off. Okay. Okay, we're gonna do some sports content real quick. All TVs will put it in their brightest mode because people watching sports want to max out on contrast and brightness, right? It's not about color accuracy, it's about reading the score and seeing all the motion details. So obviously we're not going to test motion today, but at least we can test brightness and contrast, which you guys will be able to see on YouTube as well. All right, so let's take up our brightness a notch. So the brightest is vivid. Yes, so LG, recognize that, put it in vivid mode, excellent. I'm going to turn the exposure a touch so that we can separate the brightness of the TVs more easily. Sports picture mode, let's see. Oh, I wonder if Smart HDR makes it even brighter. Yeah, you know what? Sports HDR is bright. Let's give it Sports HDR. Advanced settings, brightness, dynamic contrast. Okay, put on high. And then micro contrast, I'm also put that on high. Okay, that's a Q7, QM8. I'm going to match its settings to the Q7. Dynamic contrast, high. Wow, it has something extra called dynamic brightness. Let's get a brightness plus. And micro contrast on high. As you can see, it makes the blacks a little bit blacker. So the contrast pops a bit more. All right, U7K for sports, not energy saving, vivid. Let's see how that compares to the actual sports. It's just a change of the white. How about standard? Yeah, vivid. Just so it matches the white point of the other TVs. Make sure light sensor is off. Yep. Brightness, high. Local dimming, dark detail. Does it do anything? Active contrast, I'm going to go to high. You see the contrast improves a touch because it lowers the lower end of the scene. Anything that's dark becomes a little bit darker. Dynamic tone mapping doesn't work because it's SDR. All right. Okay. And of course, the G3 is slowly dimming as we hold it in place. So let's try it again. All right, let's do this. Let me take myself off real quick. So in sports, although the G3 is bright, the QM8 is the brightest by a touch, then comes the Q7, and then comes the U7K. So if you really need a bright TV in a bright room, every nit counts because you're in such a bright room. The QM8 is the one, but the U7, or not U7K, the Q7 is very close, right? I mean, it's bright. I'm eyeballing it as well as looking at my camera's meter, and it does feel that the QM8 is only a touch brighter, but not by much. Not by much at all. And these scenes are very hard to maintain brightness for an OLED because it's a full screen white, or this scene, right? This hockey. So max brightness, the QM8 is the brightest. So if you really need a bright TV for bright room sports watching, start with the QM8 and you'll be thrilled. The Q7 is close. Just doesn't have that extra bright punch of the QM8. And this is where the mini LED comes in. Mini LED gives you brightness, but at a higher efficiency, meaning it uses less energy to get there. So mini LED is more about efficiency than image quality. It gives you brightness with less energy. That's why the Q7 is so good. It doesn't need mini LEDs to look great. It just needs software and dimming zones. And even the dimming zones is not enough, but the software is. So for sports watching, I'm fine with either the Q7 or the QM8. I mean, it's pretty close. I'm seeing the scenes, and the QM8 is only a touch brighter, whereas the U7K is clearly a step down in brightness, actually closer to the G3. So the scenes that I selected for this sports sample is a lot of bright greens, a lot of bright whites, football, or here, football, soccer, or the other global football, American soccer. The G3 is okay, right? When it comes to this, where it's mostly green, it's not full screen white, it's fine, but the QM8 is consistently bright in all the scenes. So the QM8 is definitely a great TV for sports watching, and the the Q7 is definitely a great TV for sports watching, barely less bright than the QM8, whereas the U7K clearly does not want to compete with the U8K. I expect the U8K to match the QM8, expectations being what it is, we'll see, but I'm surprised the Q7, oh, here we go. I think this scene is good because you can see the Q7 is a touch less bright than the QM8, but we're talking just a touch less bright. And the G3, not bad for an OLED, right? Even with MLA, it's brighter than it used to be. And the C3 is not even going to come close for sports watching like that. All right. Okay, let's check questions. The QM8 sold me with hockey and sports in general. I'm buying. Yes, I have to agree, Kinotro. The QM8 is a great all-around bright TV. It does everything definitely way above average, and at $1,200, and it comes in an 85-inch, $2,300, and you're getting that level. It's really hard to compete as value, picture quality, and everything. Yeah, you're not. You're not wrong. And also the audio. I mean, we're not going to do audio samples today because it's really too hard to standardize. But I'll tell you, the QM8 is very loud. It is as loud as the U8H was last year, if not louder. So if you need volume and you're not quite ready to get a sound bar because you don't know which one to choose, or you spend all your money on a 85-inch QM8, I have every confidence it'll be loud enough for a while. Overheating. That's why it's off. So let me jump in. Let me add myself real quick. Hey, there I am. Okay, we'll see what's up after sports here. Any questions, just jump in and keep on asking away. Upscaling DVD, that's what's going to be next. Yes, Lisa, we're going to do some QM8 processing comparison. So upscaling DVD is the start of that. We're also going to do a low bit rate, watching YouTube sports, streaming, stuff like that, where I know for sure YouTube does not have great bit rate. Let's see how they compare to the G3. Okay, and my camera's on cool down, that's why. I just realized it's not battery issues, it's overheating issues. I know I promised to put up the FX30, but I wanted to use my lens quality of the A7S4. But next time, when the QM8 or when the U8K, I get so confused. When the U8K comes this week, I'm going to swap cameras so we don't have an overheating issue anymore, because that one's going to be a long stream. I think a lot of you want to see those comparisons. Okay, let me switch out DVD in the meantime. So we're going to watch A Dog's Life. Hopefully I don't get shut down, so I'll just catch a couple of scenes so you guys can see. A Dog's Purpose, that's what it's called. A Dennis Quaid classic. I'm going to find the right scene before I activate my camera again. I'm going to let it cool down a bit longer. But in the meantime, I'll search for the right scene for you guys and ask questions away. Oh, great question, Fabrice. Thank you for joining us. I missed the beginning. How is the black bar contamination pollution on these three LED sets? So QM8 has the best black bars, very close to the OLED. The Q7 is surprisingly right there. I am so impressed by the Q7, but at $800, there's only so much you could do. Definitely, if you're watching a lot of HDR and dark room and you're sensitive to black bars, start with QM8. The QM8 black bars are near OLED-like. Obviously, it's not exactly OLED. There are always some scenes where it's just a touch lifted, but it's darker than the U8H. So the QM8 is definitely a step darker than the U8H. Q7 is just behind the U8H, but it's more even. I'm not getting those blooming areas where it's like bright and then the black bar right above that bright area is a bit lifted. The Q7 is actually even. So the Q7 has done a phenomenal job of staying ahead of the U7K. The U7K has more dimming zones, but its black bars are lifted. And so we need the U7K to get a firmware update to fix those black bars if it ever happens. But the Q7 black bars is for less than 200 dimming zones, easily as good as the older Samsung Q90T. Well, actually better than the Q90T, I would say, and close to the QN90B at the beginning of the year. Now, I think by the end of the year, they fixed their black bars a bit, but the Q7 is really good if you're not too sensitive to black bars. The U7K is noticeable, regardless or not if you're sensitive to black bars. So the QM8, though, right now is in the lead for best black bar until we get the U8K, so we'll see. Can we get the best setting for the QM8? Yeah, we can. I did that at the beginning though. So if you go to the very beginning of this video, I gave the best HDR setting for all of them, the Q7, QM8, and U7K. Fast forwarding through all the previews. But we'll do a quick settings check before we start because, upscaling being what it is, because this will be SDR, but it'll be movie mode. Oh no. Apparently the player is not playing nice with the DVD. Let's try this again. Here we go. Here's a good question. How many dimming zones QM8 has? QM8 has over 1,000, just over 1,000 dimming zones. We're talking about closer to like 1,008, just over 1,000 dimming zones. The Q7 has less than 200 dimming zones, and the U7K has between 300 and 400 dimming zones, like 380 or something like that. If I cannot get this DVD to play, I'm just going to go straight to YouTube TV. All right, we're going to have to go to YouTube TV. Oh, actually, you know what? Oh, wait. Here it is. Okay. I'll just pause this random scene. Oh, no. Not good. 1 second here. let's try this again. I'm changing the TV mode back to movie because it was on sports mode for a second there. So I don't know what happened with U7K. This is a, here, let me take myself off real quick. Okay, so random scene on a DVD. This is DVD content, and they all look to process very similar, except the G3 looks to be sharper than either the Q7 or the Q8. So I don't know if you guys noticed that, but the AI processing upscaling 480p, it looks a little bit sharper on the G3. So let's see if I change the sharpness on the Q7, if that helps any. Because the G3 default's doing a great job upscaling SDR 480p content. Clarity. Okay, let's start with sharpness and see if his face gets any better here. Nope. Let's see, digital noise reduction, high, off. Yeah. So as expected, these settings, the additional settings don't do much in terms of helping with upscaling. So G3 definitely great at upscaling 480p content. You can see the pixels and information where it isn't there, right? It's just the freckles, everything on his face is very well resolved on the G3. QM8 and QM and the Q7, it just looks like 480p content, no big deal. It's just on the G3, it's a step higher. And I don't think it has anything to do with OLED. I really think this is the G3's better processor. And I don't know what happened with the U7K. It kind of like compressed everything to a smaller looking screen. Maybe I have to adjust it with aspect ratios. Let me play with that real quick. Let me see if I can fix that. That's kind of weird. Let's trying anything at this point. This feature is currently unavailable. All right, that's not going to work. Let's see here. Nothing in clarity. I want to see if I can get it. Yeah, I don't know what's wrong with the U7K. I might have to uncover this at a later time. I don't want to spend right now doing it. So I'm going to lower the exposure a bit, or actually I'm going to lower the brightness of the Q8. The Q8 still over brightens the SDR. At 65, it's still too bright. Okay, that's a little bit better. And only the G3, I believe, is calibrated to SDR. The other ones are not. So, but just looking at the brightness, I just want to match it so that you guys can see the resolution more than anything. So if you guys are watching DVDs and so forth, you're not getting the Q7 and the QM8 average. I'm not going to say it's terrible, but having it next to a benchmark processor like the G3, you see the differences, right? And the C3 shares the same processor as the G3. Let's make sure it's not doing the upscaling, classy. Well, so if the player is doing upscaling, but the QM8 and the Q7 doesn't look like it's upscaled, what did it reverse the upscaling? Right? What's happening here? Okay, so let's get this out. See, I miss my Panasonic. I cannot get this thing. I cannot get anything to work in this thing. So this is the Revon. The Revon is not recommended, by the way. Oh, let's force it to 480p. Let's make the TVs do some work, right? Okay, all right. We're forcing 480p out. Let's have fun. Okay, so resolution is 480p. Oh, already right there, I can see it's much better on the G3 still. Okay, well, it's pausing on its own, so what a great place to stop. And the U7K still has issues with its aspect ratio. Okay, so upscaling on the G3, definitely it does the AI, wonderful job on the G3. Just, it nails it. And this is forcing 480p. So if you guys watch a lot of DVD content, you might have to look at the C3 if it's SDR, or even the B2, B3, because you don't want it that bright anyway, right? But if you want a bright SDR and bright HDR, yeah. Or, well, we'll see. The S95C should be as good, but we'll do that another time. So upscaling DVD, Q7, QM8, average, doesn't compare to a high-end TV like the G3. And the U7K, I'm having issues getting the aspect ratio right. I don't know what is up with that. All right, let's get this out. Yeah, I looked at that, classy, couldn't find it. I'll have to spend time. I didn't even expect this problem, but the G3, or rather the U7K, in the, let's see, display and sound. Maybe it's in the screen. Direct. Auto. Auto. Normal. Like, what's happening here? Wide. Oh, there you go. Zoom. Nope. Direct. Yeah. How about this? 21 by 9. Nope. It looks like zoom. Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like wide is the way to go. But you're going to get black bars. Oh, maybe overscan? That doesn't do anything. Okay. So there you have it. I tried. Yes, the QM8 brightness does pop. And I'm at like 50 something brightness. It could get very bright. So upscaling, low resolution, G3 really good job of filling in the blanks. Remember, it's a 4K TV, so when it's 480, oh my gosh, how many pixels do you have to fill in, right? And the G3 does a great job filling in those missing pixels. Okay, let's go to low bitrate content. Or let me check questions first here. Hello. So we got. And Classy, thank you for hopping by again. We should be finishing up soon. We're going to do low bit rate and then off angle viewing, and then we'll be done. Yay. I am a big fan of the QM8. I'm not complaining at all. Great TV, and right now it has definitely beaten the U8H. There's no doubt about that. And Tony agreed, QM8 brightness does pop. Yeah, right? I mean, this is pretty impressive. Or rather, if I take myself out, on the G3, it actually looks like 1080p. So very impressive. Yeah, this is a DVD of A Dog's Life, or I'm sorry, A Dog's Purpose, tearjerk as it is. Okay, let's move on to the next one. We are going to do low bitrate streaming. So I'm going to low bitrate streaming. I'm going to swap to the Chromecast YouTube TV and let's see what happens. Okay, let's get it going. Hopefully it gets going. Oh, have it on the wrong input. Okay, that should work. Hey, there we are, Chromecast. Hello. Okay, let's get to YouTube TV. So why am I choosing YouTube TV? Apparently it has the worst bit rate of all the services. So it's a great test for a TV's ability to upscale low bit rate content. And this is different than upscaling low resolution content. So you saw in the low resolution, right? The G3 did a great job with DVD. And the other two TVs, average, I mean, nothing crazy. And the U7K just failed to the degree that it could not expand the image. And maybe I'm in the wrong setting. I'm going to have to talk to Hisense about that, but it wasn't easy to find, right? So you guys saw where we explored the zoom in, all the different various aspect ratios, none of them worked. So that's something that I think they're going to have to fix. Okay, low bitrate streaming. Skip that. We will not watch NFL because I do not want to get hit. Let's see, how about, everyone watch Sports Center. I'm going to pause real quick here. Let me make sure. Resolution. So we're on 720p 60, right? What I'm going to do is make it more challenging, 480p. So we're going to do YouTube TV 480p. See what happens. Yep. And this kind of reflects some cable channels as well. I'm looking for content where there are large swaths of blank color, like here, where the wood floors. So the wood floors has all that texture. I want to see how does that texture look between the three TVs. So let me adjust the exposure so you can see this a little bit better. And I'm looking at the words and all the artifacts around the words, like where are you, right? They all look fairly similar. I don't see anyone standing out as better or worse, but that's because the more challenging color is blue. So, well, that was scary. Okay, so remember it's 480p, that's why it's unclear, but that's the point, right? Is when you have 480p low bit rate, how well do these TVs do? Now, on the sports sticker on the bottom where it says next Lakers off-season priorities, that actually is probably the highest quality of the bit rate. So you can also see how they do in this mix. So in this mix, I do like how the QM8 and the Q7 resolves that. It's actually a touch easier to read than the G3, where that sports ticker is. But then, of course, the G3, it doesn't like static content anyway. So as you can see, it's not as bright. So for sports watching, it's not my first choice. And why would you spend extra money on the G3? You wouldn't, right? This is probably the worst use case for the G3. Okay, so here, the clarity in the sports ticker of the QM8 and the Q7, QM8 specifically, is phenomenal. So let me turn down the brightness a touch so you guys can see. Here we go. So look at the sports ticker on the bottom where it says SC Next Best Fits for Kyrie. It really pops on the QM8 and the Q7. You can really read that clearly, and that's what you want, right? Now, oh, you know what? Let's change the setting. Duh. Because if you're watching YouTube TV and you're watching ESPN, you might want to watch it in, let's say, standard mode, right? So I'm going to do standard. We already know that vivid mode is a thing, but let's do standard and see how it does. Okay, standard. Whoops. Let's try that again. Here we go. Sports. Because there's only two modes, either sports or movie, right? Oh, yeah. The sports ticker really pops in sports mode. I mean, the contrast goes crazy because it's optimized for Sports Center, essentially. Because they want you to be able to read scores easily, read information easily. It's less about any kind of accuracy and more about how easy can I make it for you to read the score and all that good stuff. So HDR, standard, vivid. Oh, sport, there it is. Okay, let's try that. Okay. So the Q7, almost as bright as the QM8. The QM8 is the brightest. Again, QM8 is great for just watching everyday sports, but I love how it just pops where the words are, right? What you're looking for is details as if it was a score or something like that. So here's one. Oh, excellent. This is what I'm looking for. Okay, so let's look at all this macro blocking, pixelation. How do they do? This is what I'm talking about. So this is a difficult image, and it looks like the QM8. So it actually looks like the U7K does a good job somewhat of cleaning some of that up. I mean, it's still there, but it's not obvious. I'm going to show you right here real quick. Okay, so look at this part, this corner here, right? Compare it. How obvious it is. This is where people get annoyed by the pixelation. And of course, we could always play with, this is where we're going to play with that setting, the whole digital noise reduction, blah, blah, blah. Does it do anything? And let's see. So it's on medium, high, off. It does absolutely nothing. So just leave it on high for fun. Noise reduction is on auto. Let's turn it off. Low. Yeah, as suspected, it doesn't make a huge difference at all. Gradation is on low, high. See, when you have the bit rate is so bad, it is what it is. The question is, how obvious is it, right? And so let me see if I can make it more obvious on the U7K, or make it better. Nope. Active contrast. And the reason why you have these SDR or HDR toggling is Chromecast recognizes all the TVs as having HDR. So Chromecast converts everything to an HDR signal, right? And sometimes you don't even know about that. So partly the reason why the U7K looks a little bit better is it's slightly dimmer and its contrast is slightly less. So arguably you can say that, well, maybe it helps, right? But they're all very similar in some scenes. Again, we're at 480p, low bit rate. U7K is the dimmest. Even, here, let me give it the brighter Sports HDR. Oh, it is in Sports HDR Vivid. Yeah, it doesn't help. It just changes the white point. It doesn't do much. So if you want a bright sport watching TV for streaming YouTube, you got to go with either the QM8 or the Q7. QM8 is the brightest for sure. That one looks actually pretty good. Well, I think there's one here. I think it's like, this is, okay, there we go. So if you look at the Indeed ad, the blue background is where the macro blocking is. And the G3 looks pretty good here. Let me turn it down slightly. They actually are pretty fair. So I cannot say that the U7K or I can't say the Q7 or the QM8 is worse than the G3. I can say the QM8 actually, inspiring cancer comeback. There's more clarity here. And the Q7 actually has more clarity than the G3. So maybe there's something in the G3 I should play with. 1 second. Let's see if I can make inspiring cancer comeback better on the G3. Because the clarity, I'm able to read it much better on the TCL TVs. Let's see, high, does that help? I'll just leave it on high, can't hurt. Super resolution, high. Oh, maybe I'm seeing things. It looks a little bit better. Let's put auto, high. It's still not caught up to the QM8 or the Q7. High, off. Yeah, this is not going to help much either. I'll just leave it on high, but smooth gradation is not going to help you with this much noise, digital noise. So the G3 is what it is, and I'm talking about, let me do this again so I can point it out. So we're talking about right here, inspiring cancer comeback. It is very clear on the QM8 compared to the G3, and the Q7's clear, but not as bright. So it feels like the QM8 is definitely designed for YouTube TV. If you're a big fan of YouTube TV and it's low bitrate content, hey, QM8 is the way to go. I'm pretty impressed with what it's doing. Oh, here we go. Yeah, definitely. Words and letters on the QM8 kills it with YouTube content, low bit rate. So again, we're at 480p, right? Now, if we increase it to 720, it should be better for all three TVs, right? You would think. Let's see what happens. Let's see if they can do 720, 60 a little bit better. Oh, more noise. This is great. It's like, I couldn't make this stuff up. I love all this noise. Forces the TVs to work. Hope you guys can see the noise. Okay, so all that macro blocking and all those pixels, right? That's because of low bit rate. So the question is, who smooths it the best? Here I see a separation between the QM8 and the Q7. So it looks like the QM8 has, and maybe it's more dimming zones, maybe it's a processor, can't say, but it looks like they do a better job of cleaning that up. Now, we know that G3, I activated, didn't activate. I mean, I don't think it'll make a difference, but we can play with these things again and see. Because my goal is to remove some of that macro blocking stuff. Noise reduction high, MPEG high, smooth gradation. Let me take that off, see if it changes. Oh yeah, no, I gotta keep it on high. Oh, yes, you gotta keep smooth gradation on high for the G3, for sure. That really helps. MPEG noise reduction does not make a difference on the G3 for YouTube. How about just plain noise reduction? Nothing noticeable. So definitely smooth gradation for low bitrate content. That helps, but the QM8 still feels like it's a little bit better. So and yeah, the G3 is nice and bright. But remember, we're doing low bitrate content, and QM8 is becoming more and more of every man's TV because every man has to deal with these macro blocking low bitrate issues. Let me see if I can get, not this setting. Well, let me double check my setting here. I'm going to match it to the Q7. Okay, clarity, digital noise reduction, let's put on high. Noise reduction auto, let's put on high. Gradation, high. Okay, so put all that on high. And then the Q7 will do the same. See if it can match that. It's close, but still, I like the QM8 noise reduction the best. And U7K, see what we can do here. Double check. Smooth gradient, let's take that to high. Noise reduction, high. Okay. Oh, definitely smooth gradation helps. U7K, smoothest. Okay, that made a big difference. So let's rewind this a touch, see what happens. And that's, oh, there we go. Oh, I missed it. No. Oh, well, I tried. So the U7K, once you have smooth gradation on high, it does a great job. I don't think I can find it anymore. Well, actually, this could be good right here. Definitely, YouTube TV is a challenge, but it does fairly represent low bitrate content when it's just crappy all around. And look, it's so crappy I can't even get a connection. What is up with that? Let's get out of there real quick. Okay, and no signal. So my camera overheated just in time. Okay, I'm gonna let it cool down. I think we've have some rough conclusions. Let me jump in real quick. All right, rough conclusion. U7K, smooth gradation on high, looks great. for low bitrate content. On all the TVs, you have to turn smooth gradation on high if you have low bitrate content. There's no doubt about it. On the U7K, it looks least obvious because it's bad source regardless. So the U7K, it does look pretty good. So it's one of its few wins today. So bravo, U7K. Definitely improved processing over last year. The G3, no matter what I did, it's maybe too good at showing all the details. And in this case, you want to eliminate the details, right? So where it does really well with 40p content and it adds information and make it look good, whether it's a little bit rate content and you don't want to add too much information, but you want to roughly smooth out bad information, the G3 isn't doing it as well. So for YouTube TV, not necessarily it's going to look great on the G3B, and that's not the G3's fault. It really is. YouTube TV is not good enough. And the QM8 is a little bit better than the Q7, so just something to think about. But I know many of you are asking, what about this low bitrate content business? Okay, let's see what kind of questions you guys got. Boom. Yes, SF. Unfortunately, a lot of people have it. If you watch a lot of sports, so in the US, if you watch a lot of sports and you don't have cable or you've cord cutted and you want access to the NFL channel, college football, which I'm a big fan of, YouTube TV is the easiest way to get all of that under a package. But cable TV isn't great either. However, it should be better than YouTube TV, no doubt. Lisa, you're uncontrollable. Maybe I will get the A95L and move the A95K to the bedroom. Not a wrong choice. A95L is going to be fun to watch this year. Okay, let's see what we have. Oh, off-angle viewing. All right, if you guys have no questions, let's try off-angle viewing and see how that works. 1 second. So I'm going to move the camera and everything. Enjoy and entertain yourselves. Be right back. Okay, so after much rest, the dog's purpose finally came on. Like, what happened? It took the player about 15 minutes to get its act together. So you know what? It's on. So I'm going to show you guys what it looks like. I'm going to turn down the exposure. So this is, let's put this back. This is back to 480p upscaling real quick here. It's too funny. Ah, temperamental players. Okay, so yeah, nothing's changed. The G3, all the details there, so forth. We all know what it looks like. It looks the best. It has the best upscaling. So we can easily conclude if you are watching DVD content and you're on a TV that upscales it well, I see more information in the hair of the dog. And it's a course on the QM8 and the Q7. The U7K actually looks pretty. Oh, wait, you know what? Let me move it back to Filmmaker. Let's make it a fairer comparison here. So we're gonna go back to Filmmaker real quick, and then we're gonna go off angle. So sports, movie, and take clarity down. Okay, so this is all off. Does it get? Yeah, I would say take gradation clear off because there's also already not enough information in the lack of pixels. Adding any more processing may end up making things worse. Ooh, yeah, movie. Okay. Reduce it around, compress, turn this off. Yeah, that doesn't make a difference. Keep that off. For some reason, the U7K feels like a Sony to me. See, it just turns on. Automatic light sensor. Where did that come from? All right. Okay. So in this scene, the dog looks the clearest, and the paint, the background, the red painted boards on the G3 looks the clearest. It's just the G3 really does have good upscaling of DVD low resolution content. This is different than low bitrate content. So, all right, now we're going to move to off angle real quick. So I'm going to swap out this DVD one more time. Is this too extreme? This is not a perfect solution. So obviously the camera is a little bit closer to the QM8 and the G3. That will affect the off angle a little bit, but you really get to compare the Q7 and U7K off angle. So if you're really not cross-shopping the QM8 with the Q7, if your budget is the QM8, don't drop the Q7, wait for the U8K. What we're doing here is the G3 represents very good off-angle color saturation, but then you get to see, well, the QM8, how much are you losing by saving some money and going to a mini LED? And then with the Q7, U7K, you're able to compare, oh, here we go, off angle. You're able to compare what exactly, how exactly they are off angle. Okay, so I'm going to find a colorful scene that will give you a chance to kind of look at the different colors and how it shifts off angle. This might work. Yeah, so this is a good one. We'll do this one and we'll do the peacock feather because I think that has a good gamut of colors, right? Let me double check all the movie modes, make sure they're all on the same. All right. Okay, so this is off angle. Let me bring it on angle so you guys could see if there's any changes. I mean, it's not terrible, right? You guys see the difference? Let's go to the next one. First wheel for off-angle blooming. All right, let's try that next. Ferris wheel for off-angle blooming. So we're going to turn up the exposure when we get to the Ferris wheel for off-angle blooming. So we're on angle again. Oh, this is a good one. Let's stop here. Let's do a quick off angle for this one as well. Okay, let's go on to the Ferris wheel. I'll leave it there. We'll just go straight to the Ferris wheel and we'll move it back from the Ferris wheel from this point. Oh, yeah, here we go. So off angle, the G3 full color off angle, well, mostly full color off angle, right? Nothing's perfect, but how far off is the Q7 and the U7K? I mean, slightly off, but it's not like it's black and white either. So this gives you an idea of when you're off angle, how the TVs compare. The G3 is the one that preserves the most color off angle. Interesting how the G3 doesn't look as purple as it should. It actually, there is a purple tint, but it's exaggerating the blue so much because of my camera sensor. It looks blue. It's actually more purplish like the other TVs. Oh, here's a great one. Okay. So look at the contrast, the black levels on angle, right? So obviously U7K has a touch less contrast. We're going to go off angle and see how that shifts. You see how much the blacks lift a little bit? So let's go on to the Ferris wheel now. Oop. I forgot. This is the older disc, so it's a little bit different. Here we go. Okay. Oh, wow. The Q7 still looks pretty good off angle, better than the U7K even. It's more obvious. So off angle, the Q7, the blooming isn't so bad. Let me increase the exposure a bit more. Okay, so now you see on top of the Ferris wheel, you see a little bit of that off angle. So let's put it on angle, see if that changes. So that's on angle. Close the drapes. Okay, on angle. Let's move it off angle one more time. So the QM8, definitely, you're getting your money's worth. Off angle, blooming, very well controlled. And I'm eyeballing it off angle. It definitely is a step up. And the Q7, this is your compromise, but surprisingly, it's better than the U7K with way more dimming zones. So very cool. All right, I think we're about done. So let's take your questions. What did I miss? What do you guys want to compare? This is your chance. Oh, settings. Someone was saying what are the best settings for the QM8? So in HDR content like this, it's not much to change, but oops, did I just turn the power off? So the settings button and the power button are right next to each other. So HDR, we are in movie mode, brightness always 100 to get HDR working. Remember the QM8 slightly overtracks heavily EOTF, so it'll always be a little bit brighter, but you still want brightness at 100, right? Contrast 100, black level 50, dynamic contrast is off, black stretch does nothing. Oh, dynamic tone mapping, I don't know how it turned on, but it's off now. And turning it off actually helps blooming even better, even more. So for the QM8, always leave dynamic tone mapping on unless the scene is so bright and you're not getting enough of that shadow detail. That's when you turn it on. But I normally leave it off. Local contrast is your local dimming. Always keep that on. Micro contrast, up to you. In some scenes, some people like it on high. Leaving it off is fine. There's not much to do in color adjustment. Just have it on color temperature -5. This gives you the most accurate white point, warmth, but you can play it to taste. There's no right answer, but that one is closest to source accuracy. And for me, my favorite motion setting, very personal, is blur reduction 7, jitter reduction at 3. So somewhere between 3, 1, and 2, you will have bearable stutter and not too much soap. I like it at 3, sometimes even 4 if the stutter is bad, but I'm fine at 3 more often than not. And I don't even know what dynamic acceleration is. Increases screen refresh rate sounds like a gaming thing because I don't think regular content requires anything. And the Q7 is very similar, but the only exception is that one you always have to have dynamic tone mapping on. So, okay, let's see, any questions? I'm back in focus. All right, see what we got. Great question, Michael. I love this one. Wait 1 second. I gotta get this in there. Okay. What about vertical off-angle viewing? My eyes are at the bottom of a 55-inch, so 65 or 77 will be higher up at 8 feet. You know what? Let's see. Vertical. So generally speaking, vertical or horizontal is very similar. It's the same thing. You're off angle, you're off angle. So what you see off angle to the side horizontally should be the same from top to bottom, right? My understanding is any kind of filter, it's not a orientation specific filter where it's horizontal, better in the horizontal than the vertical, but it's not terrible, but it's not great. If you are concerned about off angle, definitely consider the OLED, either the C3, C2, or the G3, or the S90C, S95C. Definitely, I only buy OLED when this is a consideration, because then you don't have to worry. I believe QD OLED has the best off angle, bar none. So S90C would be my choice. Kinotro, you're so harsh. I'm not sure if they got a bad panel on the U7K or it just sucks. The Q7 is that good, which of course, everything being relative, yeah, I guess, no, we already know it's a bad panel in the sense that it has DSE. That's why I'm not testing DSE, because it's panel lottery. Just because I might have a good panel in terms of DSE and uniformity doesn't mean you will. So it's kind of pointless, but everything else should be the same, which is processing, brightness, and resolution, upscaling. And in this case, the U7K is definitely behind the Q7. And even for gaming, I really liked what the Q7 did. So you guys saw that PS5 comparison. Obviously, if you're a serious gamer, you need to look at the S90C, but everyone else who's casually gaming, I think the Q7 is so good. After calibration, the U7K got dimmer. It's quite possible. Like, it's getting dimmer right here as we speak. No, it's actually brighter. The U7K is actually brighter than the Q7 here. So in certain specular highlights, the U7K is a touch brighter, like it should be. The QM8 may be too bright right here. It's over tracking, but the Q7, for what it is, first and foremost, it's $800. The U7K is around $850, and I believe the U7K, it's underutilizing its dimming zones. It feels like it has the same number of dimming zones as the Q7. You cannot tell that the Q7 has 1/3 the dimming zones. That's just crazy, right? Where the U7K has almost 400, like 380 something dimming zones, and the Q7 has less than 200, like I want to say 150, 160. That's insane, right? At least less than half the dimming zones. So the Q7, excellent processing, excellent software, but motion, I like the U7K motion a little bit better. I like to see the low bit rate on the U7K. So the U8K versus the QM8, I think is where it's going to be. Boss, you're killing me. FOMO, buy the X95L. We are going to have the X95L 85-inch shootout specifically because of all these questions. So Robert and I have spoken. We're going to fit that in. If anything, we'd rather have that than the 8K shootout personally. So I'm going to try to convince Robert that if we don't have time, I'd replace the 8K shootout with 85-inch shootout, X95L versus QM8 versus the Hisense UX. That is another 85-inch exclusive, right? So the Hisense UX with 5,000 dimming zones versus the X95L, Sony's flagship, true flagship mini LED, versus the TCL Q7. And as we know, just because the Q7 doesn't have as many dimming zones per se, look what it did with the Q7. So this is very exciting. And they're going to have, I believe, we're going to try to fit in the QN900C or the QN90C or 95C 85-inch. We'll see what ends up being available. But for sure, those three will be there. Okay. And hey, Getty G man, what do you mean? Why light is turning on automatically on the U7K? Is that a glitch or processing issue? Let me know what you mean, and we'll take a look at that. So here, let me just let this play on. Otherwise, the G3 is going to think it's going to have to dim, and bad things happen. All right. And this is true, SD. Well, Sony specifically, Sony does Borg the smaller sizes. Well, they did it with the X95K last year, and this year they didn't even bother releasing a 65, 75-inch version of the X95L, unfortunately. But Samsung seems to have done a good job with their smaller sizes. Well, the QN85 have been ADS, and the 85-inch is VA. So arguably, Samsung did it with the 85 series, but on their 95 series, it seems to be consistent across the board. So, are there tickets to the shootout this year? Definitely reach out to Robert Zone. It's up to him whether he makes it a public thing or not, or so. Reach out to him. His email is at valleyelectronics.com. So who knows, right? Maybe he'll have a select few to show up. Okay, so unless there's some pressing questions, I think we are going to be done today. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. And too long, didn't read, you just got here. Q7, highly recommended, especially for its price. Right now, it is in the lead for the best TV under $1,000. Over 1,000, QM8, you see where the money's going, right? It's definitely a good TV, and just in time. Overheated again. So let me center myself here. All right, and the U8K remains to be seen. It's coming this week, so I'm going to have a QM8 versus U8K live stream at some point this week. It'll just be QM8 versus U8K. You guys already know what the Q7 and U7K is capable of. I might just replace the U7K and put the U8K right below that, because the U7K clearly, I think it's outmatched more often than not in this pseudo shootout. Robert, thank you for letting me use that word, shootout. But in this face-off, the Q7 is my recommendation at this point, under $900. Gaming bar on the Q7 is pretty cool. I like it. It works very well. So, hey, Crypto Color Lights, you came just in time to say hello and goodbye. And hey, as he says, don't forget, click like if you enjoyed this video. And I'm going to try to redo the audio on this, repost everything before the weekend, so it'll be cleaned up, fully indexed, and then good stuff, right? So we'll have some more comparisons next week or this week actually, when the U8K arrives. I'll try to fit it in maybe this weekend if I can. So we'll see. Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for putting up with all the audio issues and technical difficulties. It will get better. This is why I have to test everything before M-Wave and before the shootout. So until next time, everybody, stop the FOMO.